Hey homies. Today's special what if Dean became ultimate angel hunter. So firstly I want to inform you that I do love your feedback. Comment on what changes you want in my videos and what you don't like. Also, suggest crossover characters for Dean Winchester. So move into the video. His brother was so wonderful, so beautiful. He loved him with all his being and hung on to his every word. Wherever Lucifer went, Seraphiel followed without question. When Lucifer was cast from heaven, Seraphiel followed, lost and uncertain. After the rebellion, Seraphiel had followed Lucifer to hell, but his brother pushed him out. Kept him away with a legion of freshly made demons, wearing the faces of their fallen brothers and sisters. With nowhere to go, he tried to return to heaven, and the other angels punished him, marked him as a traitor by destroying his beautiful wings. Once white and shining with the light of the morning star, now they were stained red by the death he had gladly dealt against his brothers and sisters. He could not understand. Why did his father make him this way? He was so completely devoted to his brother. Of course he would support him. Were his fellow angels that blind? Was he the one at fault for being made like this? For being capable of so much love and devotion? No matter how much he screamed and begged, his father would not answer. The years wore on. At first, he was angry and spiteful. He led the virtuous astray in an attempt to get a reaction from his father. He started wars between peaceful peoples, a rumor here or a stolen treasure there. When he found out that the demons were recruiting humans into their ranks. He learned from them and shared his newfound knowledge with humans just how easy it was to summon a crossroads demon. The demons became so overwhelmed they had to reorganize. But it was all for naught. His father remained silent. He brought wars and plagues down upon his father's favorite creations. His corruption tainted his very being. He no longer needed to ask his vessels for permission. He simply took who he wanted. He destroyed God's flock from within. A silent creeping wolf who infected those around him. His anger became legend and his vengeance against perceived slights, Moreso. His acts were lauded by the wicked. And still, his father remained silent. There was nothing. No divine retribution from heaven. No word from heaven of what to do with him. It was slow, but heaven abandoned the old routes of communication. At first, Seraphiel had thought it was a sign. They would finally do something to stop him. He found the new lines, and with them, a change in Enochian. The words were new, but the message was the same. The same prayers. The same guidance to give aid. Nothing about his deeds. Nothing about tracking him down and stopping him. Heaven no longer cared. His father no longer cared. He realized he was truly abandoned and alone. The broken toy. Thrown out to never be loved again. Seraphiel sulked for hundreds of years. He gave up destroying human lives and chose to live among them. They were a single stitch on the gaping wound that was heart. He liked them well enough, but there was no true attachment. No reason to really care when they needed help. Through his contacts, he heard the whispers. Events were lining up. The right bloodlines were being brought together. Any generation now, two brothers would be born. The mixed bloodlines that would allow Michael and Lucifer as true vessels to form and continue through the generations, making them ready for when the apocalypse came. Mary Winchester's firstborn would have been Michael's true vessel, had there been no complications during childbirth. Seraphiel had been watching and seized his chance, taking the now empty vessel. His corruption ensured his ability to take the corpse, and he was close enough to Lucifer to hitch a ride on the bloodline with no ill effect. In silence, Seraphiel slipped in and became Dean Winchester. John and Mary Winchester's miracle baby. He would have destroyed them all, but Mary's love saved them. Mary saved Seraphiel. Only in heaven had he felt so much love. This human that became his mother gave him a new purpose. He was going to end the bloodline, ruin Michael and Lucifer's showdown. Curse them beyond resurrection. But now, he wanted nothing more than to make Mary happy. He became her perfect little boy. When Samuel was born, he promised to protect his little brother and keep him safe. Then Azazel took Mary from him. And it was on that day, as he felt the taint of demon blood flowing through his baby brother, that Dean Winchester knew he had to keep Sam on the right track. As John Winchester learned more of the supernatural, Dean had to become more careful. He had to control the rate in which he healed. He had to sleep now. He used to get away with staying up all night reading, but now John would awaken at the slightest hint of a noise. But it didn't matter. He could adjust. He had a family. He had people to protect. He was happy. John would go hunting on his own, slipping out and leaving his boys with little more than a note. Sometimes, they would be left with another hunter. Dean knew what he was hunting for. Information, leads, anything on the yellow-eyed demon. On Azazel. How easy would it be for him to tell John everything he knew? A name. But he couldn't. He was in it for the long haul. He had to be a good son. A good brother. Unlike before. He couldn't betray his new family like that. He was happy enough. Then Sam left. He should have seen it coming. The arguments. The silent glares and doing the bare minimum to get the job done safely. Dean would have followed, but Sam seemed happy on his own. He had friends. He had a life. Dean was happy for him. He heard the rumors from some of his demon contacts. His grace was far too contaminated for them to recognize him for what he truly was, and a few well-earned tricks over the years had ensured any new encounters saw him as human. Any who refused to speak with Dean Winchester could be convinced to speak with whoever he happened to body snatch. Azazel was going to make a move on Sam. Damage and corrupt him. Manipulate him into Lucifer's perfect vessel. It all centered on Sam's girlfriend. The date was coming up. How could he protect Sam? It would be suspicious if he suddenly popped up and killed off every demon on campus. It would draw too much attention from the demons. And if the demons were readying to make their move, then the angels wouldn't be far behind. When John found a lead, Dean called in a couple favors to get the lead to go further and keep John occupied, but safe enough that he wouldn't have to worry too much. It was then that he went to his brother. If he could get Sam away long enough, if he could time it just right, then Sam would think the love of his life had died in a simple accidental fire. No demons, just human was the perfect plan. But he was too late. Or rather, too early. Maybe he should have tried saving Jess instead of focusing on Sam. But Sam was with him now. He could keep an eye on Sam. Keep him on the right path. Make certain that he made the right choice in the end. It did not help that Sam was a constant reminder of the brother he once knew. Lucifer, brave and beautiful, so loving, and always questioning father. A small part of Dean wanted to let things run their course. If the apocalypse was going to begin anytime soon, then letting Lucifer have his vessel would be necessary. They could team up against heaven. Claim earth and hell as theirs. Hold off the angels with an army of demons and pagan gods. But, no. He had promised Mary. He had promised his mother he would keep Sam safe. Things happened. Mistakes were made. Dean couldn't keep up without giving himself away, so he made a deal. And he paid dearly. Alistair was so eager to get his hands on Seraphiel, the broken angel stuck in a human vessel. Alistair, whose real face was a broken mirror-esque imitation of one of the angels who sided with Lucifer and died during the rebellion. He claimed to love his wayward brother as he sliced into Seraphiel. Seraphiel had been forced to retain his human form in hell, only his wings showing as a reminder of what he truly was. Not once did Alistair cut into Seraphiel's wings. Seraphiel wished he would. He wished his torturer would rip them clean out, remove the reminder of how far he'd fallen, and how he could never make up for it. The attentions he bore under the thing that wore his brother's face eventually broke him. He'd already fallen so far. What was wrong with going a little further? He gave in and took up the knife. The praise he received may not have been anything like what the real Alistair would have given, but it was a soothing balm nonetheless. Surprisingly, torturing souls came easily. He had a natural talent, as Alistair was quick to point out. After the first few souls that looked at him in hope of being rescued by an angel, then in such anguish and betrayal when he started on their flesh, he couldn't take it. So, he took to hiding his wings. Kept them safely tucked away with grace. No one else would learn of his true nature. He would just be another wayward soul on the path to becoming a demon. Seraphiel wasn't expecting it when it happened. A no-account angel swooped in and grabbed him. Why was he being dragged from hell? Did they find out? Would he face an even worse punishment? Had his father finally looked upon and decided enough was enough? Why now? Did he find out Seraphiel was interfering with the plan? He struggled hard, but the lowly angel held tight. And then he was back. In the body he had claimed. He was once again Dean Winchester. He was in a coffin. He was in a coffin, buried under 6 feet of dirt that made him wish he was back in hell. He had to dig his way out. He was so exhausted from fighting against that stupid angel that he could not fly out. Then that pesky angel tried to speak to him, but with his grace so corrupted from his recent stint in hell and he was so exhausted, he could only hear through human ears. When the angel finally left, which only left him with more questions, he made his plans to get back into the game. If he was back, and apparently not on God's immediate shit list, he should check on Sam. He found Sam. With a demon. Sam was smart, but Sam was an idiot. Dean could see manipulation like what Ruby was pulling a mile away. He should know, he'd done it plenty himself. He declared it as his teenaged rebellious years. According to humans, it was normal. His father would surely forgive him for it. If he ever deemed him worthy of attention. Dean desperately wanted things to go back to the way they were. Just hunt and kill and keep Sam out of trouble. He wanted to pretend nothing happened. That nothing was happening. But everyone else seemed so interested in knowing how and why Dean was suddenly back. He knew how he was back, but he couldn't say a single word of it. He had to act like he was interested, too. He was filled with carefully hidden trepidation during Pamela's little seance. Stupid whiny angels and stupid stubborn psychics. Why couldn't anyone just leave well enough alone? The poor woman lost her eyes because Dean was too much of a coward to stop it. But he wasn't the only one to blame. So why shouldn't he summon Castiel? Sure, he had no way of killing him at that moment, but he could certainly hurt him. A little. Not very much. He just really needed to take his aggression out on someone, and the low-ranking angel that marked him would do nicely. And wasn't that a kicker? An angel that actually flaunted the pride they felt about their work. And, like clockwork, Castiel showed with flashing lights and fully extended wings. Prideful and a show-off. Dean's breath caught at the sight. Castiel's wings had been singed and damaged from the journey to and from hell. They were the color of the night sky and shimmered with hints of deep violet and green. They certainly seemed to be healing quite nicely. Dean suddenly felt very self-conscious of his own tattered wings that would never heal, so he kept them well hidden. How did a lowly soldier end up with such beautiful wings? It made him so angry and jealous. He lashed out the only way he could. He lashed out like a human. Bullets did nothing, but he didn't care. He wasn't thinking straight. He said the first thing that came to mind. Who are you? I am the one who gripped you tight and raised you from perdition, was Castiel's almost smug answer. It only made Dean angrier. Yeah. Thanks for that, he replied as his hand tightened around the knife he had hidden behind his back. He stabbed Castiel, hoping at least a little pain would get through. Castiel didn't even blink, and Dean's heart sank. He was Seraphiel. He used to be the highest ranking of the Seraphim. He used to be beautiful and loved. Now, he was no match for the low-ranking soldier that stood before him. He looked to Bobby, stricken and hoping Bobby wouldn't make any stupid moves. He was grateful that Castiel had a cooler head than he did as Bobby fell to the ground, unconscious. We need to talk, Dean, said Castiel. Alone. Dean stared at him a good while before choosing to ignore him in favor of Bobby. Once he was certain of Bobby's well-being, he turned his attention on Castiel. Your friend's alive, Castiel said. It was as if he had no idea who Dean was. Was Heaven still out of the loop? Who are you? He asked. Castiel. Dean's irritation flared. I know who you are. I mean, why you? Why were you sent to drag my sorry ass out of hell? Castiel tilted his head in confusion. I am an angel of the Lord, he replied. Dean glared at him. Some angel you are. You burned out that poor woman's eyes. He really had no place to be criticizing Castiel, and he knew it. He had done far worse. I warned her not to spy on my true form, Castiel said, almost offensively. I can be overwhelming to humans. And so can my real voice, but you already knew that. Dean licked his lips. It appeared that Castiel really didn't know. How should he go about this? Play the dumb human? Boast of what he used to be? No, he had one question that needed answering, and he needed it now. Why? Why did you rescue me from hell? Good things do happen, Dean. Dean recalled all the events leading up to his present situation. Not in my experience, he said bitterly. What's the matter? Asked Castiel, truly confused. Dean felt Castiel's grace lightly probe what he projected as his soul. He readied himself for the recoil Castiel was sure to have at seeing the self-loathing Dean harbored as both angel and human. All he got was a sad stare. You don't think you deserve to be saved? Dean hated that he couldn't keep this lowly angel out of his head. Had he really become this powerless? This human that he was so easy to read? Why do you do it? Because God commanded it, replied Castiel. Because we have work for you. And then, Dean snapped. Dean snapped. God commanded it. Work for him. In his anger, he lost what little control he had. His wings spread out behind him. It would have been impressive and intimidating, but his wingspan was now barely half of what it used to be. Feathers were out of place and whole sections were missing. What was once a graceful display of 6 wings was now a grotesque and angry red mess. Oh, God commanded it, did he? Screamed Dean. He stepped forward as Castiel backed away. So tell me, did good old dad say anything else? He obviously didn't tell you just whose ass you were dragging out of hell. Castiel's eyes flicked from Dean's angry expression to the tattered wings. Castiel made no efforts to stop his confused thoughts from reaching Dean, and Dean wondered if he even knew how. There was confusion on how this had happened. Trust that their father knew what was going on. That there was a purpose. Even memories of hearing stories about a fallen angel who attempted to return only to be beaten and shunned for his efforts. Once a great and respected leader, he was now a morality tale. You're Seraphiel? Castiel asked, his eyes trailing over Dean's wings. Dean let his wings return to a more relaxed position. He huffed in annoyance at his inability to keep them extended for long periods. Unfortunately, Castiel took it as a sign that Dean had calmed down. Castiel approached Dean and let his hand rest near his mark. Dean tensed under Castiel's touch. He could feel the purity of the younger angel touch his corrupted grace. Feel the pride Castiel felt in restoring his human body. So innocent and trusting. Nothing was filtered from Dean. Seraphiel. Sister. Brother. Father has chosen you, said Castiel. If you do as he asks, you should be allowed to come home. Dean punched Castiel. It was more from the shock than from the strength that sent Castiel stumbling back. Don't you ever touch me. And don't you ever call me by my name. Especially in front of Sam, Dean said threateningly. If father really wants me to do what he wants, then he can come down here and ask me himself. You do not wish to return? Castiel asked, radiating confusion. Dean let out a frustrated growl. Of course I want to go back. But on my terms. I don't want some nerdy middleman telling me what to do. He can take me back. He can punish me all he wants, however he wants. He can destroy my existence, but it has to be him, explained Dean. He searched Castiel's eyes and tried to use what little power he currently had to dig deeper and see if Castiel understood. Castiel allowed the pleading tug for more information in. Dean flinched at the instant regret that snapped against him. Dean knew his grace was not pretty. The grace of angel, tainted by hell and human sacrifice in his name. Human essence from spending far too long among them. There was so much hatred and self-loathing. He was drawn back to his own grace after confirming Castiel's understanding of his feelings over his return to heaven by a focused glimmer. Castiel was prodding a far corner of his grace where he hid his love and affection for others. A wave of wanting to shower that potential flooded him and he immediately cut the connection between, forcing Castiel out. Dean couldn't keep the raw fury out of his voice. Just because it goes both ways, doesn't give you permission to look, he growled as he shook. And for the record, your little plan won't work. He turned from Castiel and stooped to retrieve Bobby. He paused and looked back at Castiel. You're not going to say anything, are you? He asked, hoping he didn't sound as worried as he felt. At Castiel's confused look, Dean elaborated. To them, my friends. To Sam. I really don't want to have to explain why Sam's brother isn't his brother. He reluctantly sent out the fear he felt at being discovered. I'll find out eventually, said Castiel. But doesn't have to be today. Dean carefully lifted Bobby. He could still feel Castiel's light probing. He closed his eyes and brought his wings in tight as he felt Castiel's hope rise. Dean's eyes pricked with tears. It was a hope for a redemption that would never come. I won't tell anyone. Not even the other angels, Castiel said. Dean let out a shaky breath. Castiel was too trusting. Too honest. He didn't deserve anything from Castiel but distrust and hate. Don't expect me to return any favors. Castiel tilted his head, listening to something Dean could not hear. I am needed elsewhere, he said before vanishing. Dean glared at the space Castiel had just vacated. He had a feeling things were only going to get worse if God had really recruited him for whatever job. But was it a job? Castiel didn't know about Seraphiel. Was his job to go out and father a child to continue the line? Could he do that to some poor chick? He adjusted his hold on Bobby and started his way to the barn's entrance. He desperately needed some rest. Especially if he was going to try to eavesdrop on Angel Radio. God, how he hated Nuanachian. Sam watched his brother pace back and forth. This is good news, right? I mean, angels are real. They're a lot nicer than anything we've dealt with so far. Dean stopped in his tracks and rounded on Sam. Angels are assholes. A whole mess of dicks lounging about in heaven, taking orders, and absolutely no ability to think for themselves. And don't think for 1 second that they give a shit about humans. That's what angels are, Sammy. Not nice. Sam flinched at the harshness in Dean's voice and posture. Was Castiel seriously that much of an ass? A light. Well, then how about God? If they're taking orders from on high, then you must be pretty important for them to get you out of hell. Dean rolled his eyes. Me. I am important to God. Right. So, why me? He asked. I may have rescued a few people, and that probably makes up for smaller things like stealing and ditching chicks, but not everything. Sam let out a frustrated sigh. Oh, come on. Look, you're obviously important to someone up there, he said, so how about we not dwell on why you, and we focus on the reason for why you were brought back. Sam brought up a good point. Dean may not be able to figure out why he, specifically, was brought back, but at least they could figure out why. But it didn't stop him from wondering. Why him and not some other angel? Did they need someone more demonic and not as pure? But why not tell any angels? He knew God just adored his human creations, so maybe he needed an angel that had grown to actually like humans. Was it because of his vessel? His continuing the bloodline theory seemed to hold water. Dean rubbed at his face in irritation. Maybe there was something written somewhere on angels. Maybe, by some stroke of luck, another hunter had stumbled across something. Things would be a lot easier if he could just carve a few sigils into the walls of Bobby's home to at least guarantee them a little extra privacy, but how would he explain where he learned them? So, it was back to relying on humans and dumb luck. Fine. "What do we know about angels?" he said in resignation. Bobby dropped a pile of heavy tomes in the center of his desk. "Start reading." Dean glared at the pile, then at Sam. "You gonna get me some pie," he said and grabbed a small booklet from the top. The research was slow going, just like Dean thought it would be. Bobby made some calls, sounding more agitated with each passing minute. Dean flipped through the books, knowing already that he wouldn't find anything. His power was slowly returning, and he could feel something just wasn't right. It wasn't the angels, the energy fluctuations he was feeling were much darker and fresher, but he couldn't place what it was. Bobby decided something was wrong and that they needed to check on this Olivia he'd been trying to get a hold of. The moment they entered the room and Dean saw the body, he knew what had happened. He was extremely glad when he saw the EMF meter sitting out. That would at least get them close to the right path. As they checked on the other hunters, Dean knew it would only be a matter of time before they would run into their own witnesses. What a time to be low on the mojo. And sure enough, it happened. Dean felt it when Henriksen showed up. He was just in time to save Sam, and they quickly made their way to Bobby's. Once there, he could feel the witness that was after him beginning to manifest, so he sent Sam to search outside as he went upstairs. There, he encountered Meg. He was a little relieved. The spell was tied to Dean Winchester's body, not Seraphiel. He couldn't begin to imagine what sort of witness his guilt would summon. Or how many. He let her rough him up, and the moment Meg grabbed him, Dean replaced the worried look on his face with a feral grin. "Oh, sweetheart, did you ever pick the wrong guy?" His hand shot out into Meg's chest, and she let out a shocked scream. A wave of red and black energy pulsed from Dean's hand, and Meg quickly deteriorated. Dean stood up as he inspected his hand with a satisfied smirk. "Thanks for the recharge," he said. This was probably the best thing that had happened to him since he got back from hell. He felt great. As he headed back to the stairs, he wondered if the spell would make Meg rematerialize, or if he should just claim that he saw Henriksen. He decided to play it safe and stick with Henriksen. If Meg wanted to rejoin the party, then good for her. Once reunited and hiding out in Bobby's panic room, Bobby finally figured out what they were up against. Dean knew there was a reason he liked Bobby. The man was a good hunter, and the only real problem Dean had with good hunters was that he had to be extra careful. What Dean wasn't expecting was for Bobby to declare the rising of the witnesses as a sign of the apocalypse. Then he remembered. It was one of the so-called 66 seals. What was the first? What were the others? The seals were placed after he'd fallen. After his exile from heaven. Higher up demons would probably know. The angels would definitely know. He would have to remember to confront Castiel later. Fortunately, Bobby's book had a spell for putting the witnesses to rest. Unfortunately, that required leaving the panic room. As they left, they were confronted by Ronald. Well, it looked like Meg had a replacement. Dean wouldn't admit it aloud, but he loved this. The energy in the air during a hunt was exquisite. When the door to the kitchen slid shut, he felt like Christmas had come early. Maybe he'd have a little fun with this one. Enjoy the look on its face when he stole its energy. It was going perfectly. Henriksen had stuck his hand in Dean's chest, but Sam showed up and ruined it. When asked if he was okay, he tried to brush Sam off. Of course he wasn't alright. He was just about to suck in Henriksen when all he felt was void. He had been looking forward to that extra boost. It was like snapping his teeth down on a fork. It was back in the main room that Dean saw just how much more powerful the witnesses were compared to the average ghost. Even Meg had come back. No wonder Dean felt almost completely up to speed. He thought the game might be up when Meg made eye contact with him, but didn't he come closer? Through the confusion, he didn't feel when she appeared behind Bobby. He may or may not have extended a little of his power to keep the bowl from falling too quickly and tipping out. Later that night, as he lay on the floor running through the events of that day and what they meant, he felt himself being drawn inward. Well, this was new. He never had company in his vessel's dreamscape. He actually never spent any time there, preferring to traipse around other people's dreams. He looked around the perfect rendition of Bobby's home before standing and approaching Castiel. "Excellent job with the witnesses," said Castiel. "Yeah, thanks for the help," Dean replied, voice dripping with sarcasm. "And the warning. Very nice. You were not in need of my assistance, Sir Dean. We had larger concerns." "Let me guess, other seals being broken," said Dean. "Yes. By Lilith," said Castiel. 20 other hunters are dead. Figures. Pick victims the hunters couldn't save, so they would barrel right after us. Well, we put them back to rest. It doesn't matter, the seal was broken. I know. I can feel it," said Dean. He paused, not wanting to admit his lack of knowledge. "Look, I know there are 66 seals, but what are they to? What happens when they're all broken?" Castiel brows furrowed. "You can feel it. How did you restore your power?" Dean stiffened at the question. Stealing another entity's power wasn't exactly angelic. It doesn't matter. What happens when the seals are broken? Castiel tilted his head. You went after a witness. Hey, she started it, Dean said defensively. It doesn't matter anymore. What's done is done. Now, what happens when the seals are broken? Castiel looked away from Dean, and Dean could feel the disappointment wafting from him. Dean defensively crossed his arms and glared. He narrowed his eyes as uncertainty brushed against him. He waited, his irritation growing as Castiel's grace blasted out confusion. Eventually, the feeling gave way to a decision. And trust. Trust directed at him. Dean swallowed and held his ground. Lucifer walks free. Lucifer, repeated Dean. He closed his eyes and breathed deeply. Castiel's own apprehension mixed sharply with his own. This was why he was brought back. The answer he didn't want to face. What should he do? Help the father that abandoned him? Help the family that beat and shunned him? Help the brother that ignored him and pushed him away? So that's why you're here. To stop Lucifer, said Dean. Well, bang up job so far. Stellar work with the witnesses. That's nice. He knew he was hitting low, but surely heaven could have spared one measly angel to at least warn a handful of hunters. We tried, Castiel replied tightly. Dean let in the inquisitive stroke against his grace. He looked away this time, not wanting to see Castiel's physical reaction. He could feel Castiel searching his memories to see if he'd always been this confrontational. He gladly pushed forward a few examples of how confrontational and obstinate he could be. There are other battles, other seals, Castiel said. Some we'll win, some we'll lose. This one, we lost. Dean let out an annoyed huff and sent out a burst of anger. He received defensiveness in return. Our numbers are not unlimited. 6 of our brothers died in the field this week. You think the armies of heaven should just follow you around like they used to? Castiel asked as he drew closer to Dean. Dean allowed his wings to show and extended them slightly in a sign of warning. It was a natural reflex. Back in heaven, he would never let a lower angel speak to him like this. Back in heaven, he had the power to back up his threats. He was certain he could outfight Castiel, but without his blade, he wouldn't be able to do much lasting damage. He took a step back as he caught thoughts of Castiel wanting to save him. Redeem him in the eyes of heaven. Bring him home. Dean spread his wings further and sent out a pulse of malevolent energy. The shock and frustration that rippled out from Castiel almost made him laugh, the feelings were so strong. And then he caught the barest thread of euphoria. It was gone so fast, he couldn't feel what it was directed at. Certainly not him. Not with the overwhelming air of threat that suddenly surrounded him. You should show me some respect, Castiel said, just a hint of warning in his voice. I dragged you out of hell. I can throw you back in. And with that, Castiel was gone, and Dean was alone. No more frustration and anger that wasn't his own. He let the dream fade around him, refusing to let himself miss Castiel's presence. He awoke to find Sam getting ready for the day. He wondered how he should break the news of Lucifer to Sam. He sat up and rubbed his face. You alright? Sam asked. What's wrong, Dean? Dean looked up at Sam. He made up his mind. He knew what needed to be done. He would help the brother that loved him and stuck by him. So, God and angels, how do you feel about the devil? Dean feigned sleep as Sam dressed and snuck out of the motel room. The demonic taint that Sam carried was steadily growing. Dean needed to get Sam to stop drinking demon blood. Sure, it had its plus sides, controlling demons was always a nice perk. But how much longer until Sam was powerful enough to sense Dean's own demonic taint? He could probably play it off as being a remnant of his time spent in hell. Could he possibly remove Ruby from the picture? Genker sorry asked when Sam wasn't looking. While he was lost in his thoughts, he felt Castiel's presence manifest beside him. He curled onto his side and glared at the wall, refusing to acknowledge Castiel. He lifted a wing and pointedly covered himself. The light caress moved against his grace, and he cringed away from vision he caught of his wings. An angel's wings were their pride and joy. A representation of their purity and inner beauty. And here was Seraphiel. Damaged. Broken. Corrupted beyond repair and forgiveness. He never bothered to care for them. He never groomed them, choosing to leave them in a tangled mess. He brought his wings tighter about himself and did his best to ignore Castiel's light caresses. At least, until he felt a physical caress upon one of his wings. He flinched away as pain shot through his right wing in a familiar spore and rolled out of the bed, tripping and banging into the nightstand. He glared at Castiel. You get your freak on by watching other people sleep. Castiel sat in shock and slowly raised his hand. He held a single, brightly glowing feather between his fingers. Dean's mouth went dry at what was quite possibly the last physical evidence of what Seraphiel had been. He thought he'd managed to pluck every last white piece of fluff from his wings. He folded his wings self-consciously and was surprised to find the pain in his right wing completely gone. The feather must have been at a bad angle, and sure enough, when he looked at the base of the feather, he saw it was bent several times over. He wasn't too sure if he should thank Castiel or kick his ass. He settled on avoidance. "So, what do you want?" he asked as he sat on the other bed. "You know of Azazel and the demoness blood that flows through Samuel's veins?" Castiel asked as he stood. Dean gave a stiff nod, not liking where the conversation could potentially lead. He had followed Azazel around for a while. A demon making deals and not asking for a soul. It piqued his curiosity. When Azazel went after Mary Campbell, Seraphiel began to have his suspicions. Amidst all the random deals made, Mary Campbell just happened to be one of them. The sweetheart of John Winchester, Michael's claimed bloodline. Oh, yes, that didn't he have Lucifer and hell written all over it. 10 years later, when Azazel came to collect his part of the deal, little Dean Winchester could do nothing. He'd forgotten about the deal, too absorbed in family life. As he held Sam in his arms, watching their home burn, he could feel the contamination of the demon blood in Sam. He could have ended it all right then and there. End the bloodline as he'd originally planned. It would have been easy to walk back into the house. But he couldn't tell whether it was from demons or angels. He had promised Mary he'd protect Sam. "Then you know everything we do," said Castiel. He lowered his gaze and spun the feather he held between his fingers. "We know what Azazel did to Samuel. What we don't know is why, what his endgame is." He went to great lengths to cover that up. He looked back up at Dean, who was carefully avoiding Castiel's eyes. Dean couldn't watch Castiel. Castiel had no idea just how intimately he was behaving. Never mind the lack of personal space, grooming another angel's wings, even if by accident, was just not done. Then twirling one of Dean's feathers like that. Maybe he'd been around humans for too long, learning human sentiment. From his own experience, angels just didn't feel emotions or wants the same way humans did. The same way he did. Either Castiel was a genius at distraction, or he was really just that clueless. Dean was betting on the latter. "Samuel is headed down a dangerous road, Dean. And we're not sure where it leads. So you must stop it. Or we will." Castiel waited patiently for Dean to look at him, to acknowledge what he was saying. After a few minutes of silence, Castiel reached out with his grace. Dean gasped when he felt Castiel's grace. There was a sense of urgency behind it, but he'd never been so gently touched by another angel before. Far softer and more careful than any touch he had received from Castiel before. Lucifer's touches were always like a rough hug, Gabriel's were like a wink and an elbow nudge, and Raphael's were a brotherly punch to the arm. He let the gentle pressure in and gave Castiel's careful warnings a little attention. He was rewarded with a small pulse of acceptance and a need to help. There was such kindness there and even an offer to help him groom his wings. Why did this angel have to be like this? Why did he have to be so soft and caring and have pretty, strokeable wings and just so Dean was just so incredibly turned on? He immediately shut Castiel out, hoping Castiel hadn't felt that particular urge. Not that he would understand it. Castiel stared at Dean, his eyes wide in confusion. Dean shifted uncomfortably. He could feel Castiel's light probes and attempts to discover what had slipped from Dean. There was reluctant acceptance as Castiel's grace pulled away and a promise to seek out an answer later. Dean swallowed and looked away as Castiel tucked his feather into a pocket. Somehow, he managed to keep his breathing and wings under control, but barely. He dared to glance up at Castiel. There was still a look of confusion, but he was still perfectly in control. Dean wasn't sure whether he wanted to punch him or kiss him. Maybe a little of both. He let out a rough sigh and ran a hand through his hair. "Look, cause, I should go find Sam, so he paused and looked at the floor, clenching his fists in the bedding. "Don't you have more important things to do?" "Nothing is more important than you at this point in time, Dean," Castiel replied. Dean's head shot up and he could feel his face burning crimson. Castiel had to be doing it on purpose. There was no way he could be that clueless. But, Dean reminded himself, angels weren't human. Castiel was just speaking the truth. Dean was the most important thing on Castiel's checklist at this moment. He relaxed a little bit as his ego also deflated. "Yeah, well, don't feel like you have to stick around," he said. Castiel watched in silence as Dean pulled on his shoes and grabbed a jacket. Dean paused at the door and looked back at Castiel. He opened his mouth to speak, but shook his head instead and left. Dean found Sam quite easily. He watched as Sam forced the demon out of its victim. He had to look away as his thoughts drifted toward how Sam's gifts could be used. No, it was the easy way, and Sam's current path would only lead to ruin. And that smile that danced across Ruby's lips. Couldn't Sam see it for what it was? It wasn't a smile for Sam and his victory. It was for Ruby, for Lilith, for Azazel. It was for Lucifer. Dean would have to end this. But how could he convince Sam without giving himself away? He came out from his hiding spot and confronted Sam. So, anything you want to tell me, Sam? He felt a pang of regret at his harsh tone. Sam looked so eager, so proud. And, yes, it was quite the accomplishment, but not what was needed. He already disliked Ruby, but he really hated her right now for making Sam so reliant on his powers. Dean, hold on, okay? Just let me Sam started, but was quickly cut off. You gonna say just let me explain? You gonna explain this? Dean asked and shifted his attention to Ruby. Why don't you start with why the hell Ruby's here? Dean was so tangled in his thoughts that he had slipped. Small, but enough to raise Ruby's suspicions, if not Sam's. Ruby tilted her head to the side and narrowed her eyes. So you recognize me? Nice trick, Dean. Where do you learn it? She asked as she took a step forward. Dean held his head high. He could recover. How do you think I knew Sam was here? A little bird told me. But I don't need them to recognize that squinty little grin of yours, he said just before he jumped at her. He had her against a wall and pulled out the demon-killing knife, ready to strike her dead. He could justify it to Sam later. But Sam just had to interfere. Sam had his size going for him, and Dean had other ways. He moved just a little more quickly than he should have been able to and pushed Sam back. Just a little bit harder than he should have been able to. He rounded on Ruby, but she outmaneuvered him in his distraction. Dean was on the verge of showing her just who she was messing with when Sam called out, ordering her to stop. Ruby reluctantly let go of Dean. He managed to get his anger under control and wondered briefly what would have happened had Sam not intervened. Well, aren't you an obedient little bitch? Said Dean, knowing it would rile her up. Ruby looked like she was about to rip out Dean's throat, but Sam called her attention away. Ruby, he's hurt, said Sam, looking at the once possessed man. Go. Where the hell do you think you're going? Dean asked incredulously as Ruby brought the man's arm over her shoulder. Unless you want to go another round first, she replied. Dean watched as she helped the man out of the building. He knew that poor sucker was just going to get possessed the moment they were out of sight. He didn't feel any pity for the random human, but he did feel anger toward Sam's refusal to see what was going on. He turned his disapproving gaze to Sam. He recognized the look on Sam's face. There was no guilt over the act, just guilt over being caught. Sam started. Dean's mind was in turmoil. His thoughts drifted to Castiel's words. Stop it. He could stop it. End everything right then, right there. Temptation clotted him. He could spite everyone in one motion. Heaven, hell, his father. Everyone. He swallowed and shook his head. He had to get away before he did something he would regret. Not that that was anything new. It took all the control he had to walk out rather than fly. He heard Sam's pleading cry, but didn't spare him a glance for fear of what he might do. He made a promise. Protect Sam. Even if it was from himself. Dean was having a hard time being around Sam, so he went for a walk to clear his head. He was getting so frustrated with Sam. He couldn't really be angry with Ruby. She was a demon. It was in her very nature to behave as she was. Sam, on the other hand, was walking a thin line. Sam was already a good hunter. He didn't need his powers to help people. On his walk, Dean took down every demon and supernatural creature in a 2-mile radius. He didn't care if it attracted attention. He needed an outlet. He flaunted his wings as he took down a small group of demons, enjoying their anguished and confused screams. As he admired the aftermath, he felt a sudden shock at what he'd done. He was turning back into what he had been. He was taking his aggression out on anything in his path with an unhealthy dose of schadenfreude. There had been no need for him to go after the unsuspecting creatures. No real purpose. For all he knew, none of them had ever harmed a human. He should probably leave Sam before he went after him as well. When he returned to the motel, he snapped at Sam. He punched Sam twice, but it felt like it wasn't enough. Sam just didn't get it. He truly believed he was helping people. That just exorcising a demon was good enough. Why couldn't he see that the knife or an angelic double tap to the head was the better option? Sure, the human vessel may die, but what was one human life compared to the many that would be saved? The lights flickered as Dean lashed out at the lamp. When the phone rang, Dean tried to get his anger under control. He just wanted to leave. Leave the fighting and drama behind. Was this why he was brought back now instead of later? To play the part of the older brother and get Sam back on the right path? Would there be any chance to save Sam from what he was doing? Any of the other angels could easily take Sam out. Sam seemed so enamored with them from the beginning, why not just send them out to warn him against what he was doing? Why Dean? On the car ride over to their next hunt, Dean decided to spin a little story. He was already slipping up with small things, how much longer until he let something big out? So he told Sam that Castiel had shown him the past. He made up a few scenarios, romanticized here and there. He was quite proud of himself. He thought it was a good story and it would cover his ass if he mentioned anything about Azazel and demon blood. And then good old Sammy let it slip on his own. Well, at least now everyone knew and it was out in the open, but the tension was back. Dean wasn't too good at the whole empathy thing, being brash when he should be more gentle. He hoped the hunt would help take their minds off the demon blood fiasco. He should have known better. When they found Jack Montgomery, Dean was all for just blowing it off. From the looks of things, nothing was going on. Then Jack started eating the raw meat. Dean reached out and immediately knew what they were up against, and he had a pretty good idea of how Travis knew this guy was going to turn. Dean held the binoculars loosely and stared at the lit window. Why didn't Travis take care of this problem earlier? He suspected human sentiment and the need to believe that everything would be alright. And after talking with Travis, Sam was showing that human sentiment and need, big time. Dean knew it was stemming from Sam's need to prove to Dean that he wasn't going to turn into a monster. Maybe Sam was right and this Jack guy would have enough self-control to keep from eating human flesh. Serafiel had met a couple Rugerus that had managed to overcome their hunger. One unfortunate incident ended with the Rugeru having to kill his own son. Too bad it was an undocumented story, Sam might have benefited from it. It was during Sam's little blow-up that Dean saw himself in Sam. The demon blood, the curse that Sam would never be rid of but desperately wanted to turn to something good. All the horrid things Serafiel had done, the demonic taint on his grace caused by his actions. But Serafiel had chosen that path. Sam had no choice about Azazel infecting him with demon blood. But to continue with it. Dean wanted Sam to come out clean, to stay on the right path, but he was having a hard time getting Sam to cooperate. Ever since he had gotten back from hell, he seemed to be off his game. He finally managed to fully recuperate to his new norm, snagging a ghost here and there when no one was looking. But he was having a hard time reconnecting with Sam, and he blamed Ruby for it. He blamed himself for not being there when Sam needed him most. He also blamed himself for not even trying to get out of hell. Maybe he needed to take a different approach. He would let Sam steer things until they got too bad. So he let Sam go about the Jack ordeal his way. He was a little surprised when Sam spoke over him to give the or else news. All in all, Dean thought it went pretty well. When he and Sam burst into the young woman's apartment, he thought that maybe Sam had been right. All Jack needed was some prior warning and a push in the right direction. And then they found Travis. Poor Travis, the stubborn old man. Dean really should have been paying attention. The moment Sam was knocked unconscious, Dean sprang back up, kicked Jack off of Sam. "We did it his way, now we gonna do it my way," he said. Jack looked up in shock and could see shadowed wings projected on the walls behind Dean. He backed away as instinct took over. Wait. "Sorry, Jackie boy," Dean replied as he advanced, "you had your chance." He reached down and sent a burst of red and black energy into Jack's head. Dean turned and picked up the makeshift flamethrower from next to Sam. No need to attract the attention of any other hunters Travis may have alerted. He pointed it at Jack's body and sighed as he set it on fire. Sam wasn't going to like this one bit. When Sam regained consciousness, he found himself safe inside the Impala. He looked at Dean and saw the grim expression his brother wore. "What happened?" "I am sorry, Sam," Dean replied. "You tried. But the guy was a monster and there was no going back." He thought about what he had just said and apologized. He was trying to win Sam over, not push him away. Sam just brushed him off and dismissed his attempts at explanation. The conversation was quickly drifting to an argument. Not quite what Dean had planned. Then Sam mentioned how Dean couldn't understand. That the taint of the demon's blood wasn't in Dean like it was in him. That he had to deal with it. Dean stared ahead at the road. He understood a lot better than Sam knew. There was a time when he had gotten so used to behaving like a common demon that he actually enjoyed going after the unsuspecting and innocent humans. He understood having that corruption in his blood, in his core being, and having to fight against it. He would probably be one of the monsters they hunted if he hadn't gotten bored from his father's lack of a response. He had no one to guide him back then, only his anger. At least he could try to be there for Sam. He swallowed and told Sam he didn't need to deal with it alone. Sam stared at his reflection in the window and he spoke. "I don't want to become what we hunt," he said quietly. "And I don't want to lose my brother to this disease. I get it. You might be able to control your powers, but what happens when you become too reliant on them?" Sam sighed and nodded. "Anyway, it doesn't matter. These powers it's playing with fire. I am done with them." Dean spared him a glance. He hoped Sam was speaking the truth and not just saying it to please him. What they needed was a good old-fashioned hunt to take their minds off everything. Dean's prayers were answered in the form of what had started as a vampire hunt. And ended with a completely whacked shifter. During Oktoberfest. Beer, big pretzels, pretty girls, and a hunt. Dean had enjoyed it immensely. It was a good experience all around. Sam was doing better and there was less tension between them. All in all, a great hunt. Things were going well. And then a witch had it in her head to summon Samhain. Seraphil knew Samhain had even run around Europe, causing a fair amount of damage with him. It was when Samhain killed Seraphil's lovers, a set of ginger twins, that Seraphil assisted the humans in exorcising Samhain. And was immediately run out of town for his efforts. Dean was having trouble locating the witch on his own. She must have been using a pretty powerful spell to evade his detection. Powerful and old school, if she was able to avoid angelic detection. As they approached their motel room, Dean could feel angels in the area and he tensed up. He relaxed a little when he felt that one of the visiting angels was Castiel. When Sam yelled out a demand, Dean rushed in to intervene. He didn't need Sam being painted in an even worse light than he already was. He recognized Uriel by his wings. He kept his eyes on Uriel, remembering when he'd been banished. Uriel was one of the angels present that day. Dean kept his power and wings well hidden, feeling tremors of phantom pains. He hadn't expected to have this reaction. Anger and resentment, yes. But the underlying fear was never a part of his family reunion fantasies. Sam offered his hand in greeting to Castiel, clearly impressed, and voiced his opinion. As Dean shut the door, he felt Castiel looking for the appropriate reaction. One that Dean would approve. He gave a terse reply in the image of a handshake. Castiel grasped Sam's hand and met his eyes. "And you," he replied. Sam Winchester, the boy with the demon blood. Sam flinched a little at the remark and Dean sent a glare to Castiel. The angels were in town to prevent the seal associated with the raising of Samhain from breaking, but they couldn't locate the witch on their own. When Sam suggested working together, Uriel snapped at him. Castiel introduced Uriel as a specialist. Seraphil had witnessed Uriel's work before and he didn't feel that the devastation that would be left behind would be worth the cost of one seal. Human lives were one thing, but Uriel had a complete and total disregard for all life when it came to purification. The entire area would be void of flora and fauna for at least 50 years after the cleansing. Dean couldn't believe his father would send Uriel for the job. Surely, there was someone better. Someone with more discretion. Sam tried to plead their case, claiming that they could locate the witch and kill her before Samhain was summoned. Sam tried to push his view on angels forward, still not quite believing Dean's description. Dean wished his brother didn't have to witness true angelic behavior firsthand. Dean scoffed as Castiel said they had no choice in the matter. Of course they had a choice. Angels weren't mindless tools. Unimaginative, yes, but not completely void of free will. Seraphil questioned orders long before his fall and he knew he wasn't the only one. As Castiel justified taking action against the town just because the order came from heaven, Dean had to wonder what was going on. He noticed that Castiel was avoiding eye contact with him. Dean cautiously reached out to Castiel and Castiel swiftly locked eyes with Dean, effectively making Dean shrink back in an instant. When Castiel questioned Dean's loyalty to his father, which one, he wasn't sure. Dean evaded the question. He rounded on Uriel, playing the one card he had. His father had brought him back, so he had to be off limits for a killing spree. He wasn't sure if it would work. After all, if Dean Winchester died, he could always be brought back. And maybe it would be worth it. Just to see the look on the angels' faces when they found out they brought back an empty, rotting corpse. And Seraphil would laugh his head off at heaven and its plan. Dean quickly switched from his fantasy to reality and claimed that he could find the witch and kill her, stopping the summoning. And as Castiel cut off Uriel and gave Dean and Sam the go-ahead, Dean felt a climbing surge of uncertainty. Just where did this supposedly low-ranking angel fall on the angelic food chain? Without so much as a goodbye, both angels vanished. With a quick look to each other, Sam and Dean headed back to the Impala in silence. It broke Dean's heart to see Sam lose faith in what he believed to be true. He tried to let Sam know that not all angels were the same. He hoped finding the witch would help take Sam's mind off the matter. He wasn't expecting them to find the children's bones locked away in the teacher's desk. Was this what humans felt like all the time? Completely uncertain of what was going on. Of what was real or who to trust. No wonder Sam was addicted to his powers. Castiel's patience was wearing thin with Uriel. He used to have so much respect for any angel older than himself. They were older, wiser, more experienced and very set in their ways. It was not spoken aloud, but nearly half, if not more, of the angels disliked their father's youngest creations. Of the remaining half, the majority felt neutral. There were very few angels that actually liked humans and would actively side with them. He reminded Uriel that it was now up to Dean to take care of the seal and was appalled at how Uriel was willing to brush it off. He hoped the threat of what would happen if Uriel went against their orders would be enough to keep him in line. Castiel sent a silent prayer to their father for Dean to succeed. They screwed the fuck up. At least Seraphil's cover wasn't blown. Thanks to Sam's quick thinking, Dean didn't need to go toe-to-toe with Samhain just yet. At the cemetery, Dean made quick work of the risen corpses. He was feeling more than a little high by the time he finished with the ghosts. When he found Sam, he was more than impressed to see him holding off Samhain on his own. Then frightened for what Sam could potentially do to him. For the first time in his existence, Seraphiel feared a human. If it ever came down to it, was he angel enough to survive? Would he really be able to defend himself? Fight Sam to the death? As soon as the thoughts appeared, they vanished. Dean tried to cared, but he just couldn't do it right now. He hadn't felt like this since probably when he gorged himself on those poor Titanic ghosts. 1219. No, 29, 1921. 12. Right. Was 12 a significant number? He knew it had something to do with something else. Dean was still riding a good high when Castiel landed next to him. Without even looking at Castiel, Dean spoke. "Lem, guess I told you so. Am I right?" He looked over at Castiel, a slightly uncaring smile gracing his lips, and poked at Castiel's grace with his own. Castiel was just so sweet and innocent. Dean's pokes turned to soft caresses. He watched as Castiel licked his lips and wondered what they tasted like. He felt Castiel's struggle to remain serious and pressed closer with his grace. He was not in the mood for a serious conversation or the doubts flitting across Castiel's grace. Castiel cleared his throat. "No, I am not here to judge you, Dean," he managed to say. Dean wanted to shut his vessel and curl up to Castiel and drown. But since he was currently confined and sentimentally attached to his meat suit, he settled on closing the physical distance between them and laying his head on Castiel's shoulder. "That's nice. Judging people's not nice. But being here's nice," said Dean. He allowed his wings out and lightly tucked his left wing under Castiel's right. Why did God have to make cause just so damned comfy? So. Why are you here? Castiel stared ahead, trying to ignore Dean's complete and insistent presence. "Our orders." "Your orders suck," Dean cut in, then let out a little giggle. Castiel huffed and continued. "Our orders were not to stop the summoning of Samhain." "Well, at least you won't get fired," Dean commented. "They were to do whatever you told us to do," Castiel said as Dean tensed against him. Even Dean's grace had ceased its gentle waves and was presently hovering just above his own. Dean didn't know what to think. God had given the angels orders to follow his orders. His father, who did nothing and let him fall, was giving him command over an army again. Well, maybe not an army. 2 angels. For a day. 5 minutes. Was it a test? Was he being tested on his decisions? Did he make the right choice? What would he have done before the fall? What would Jesus do? He coughed away a laugh and tried not to think of Christian merchandising. He swallowed then asked why. "It was a test," Castiel replied. Dean made to pull away, but a wing cautiously wrapped around him, waves of reassurance pouring off Castiel. A tingle of selfishness drifted through, insistent upon Dean staying. "It was a test to see how you would perform under battlefield conditions, you might say." Dean tried not to relax back into Castiel. "Really," he tried. "It was a witch. Not the Tet offensive. I was there, why no?" Castiel let out a soft chuckle. "So, I failed your test, huh?" Dean didn't wait for an answer before he continued. "I don't care," he said. "If I had a second chance, I'd make the same call. I don't know exactly what's gonna happen when all the seals are broken. I don't know what Lucifer's gonna do. How he's gonna lash out. Hell, I don't know what's gonna happen tomorrow. But what I do know is, this here, all these kids, the birds, the trees, all of it, is still here because of my brother and me. And I'd rather stand by my human brother than by a bunch of angels that hate my very being with a passion." He sighed as Castiel sent out a soothing wave against his dark thoughts and sorrow. "You misunderstand me, Dean. I am not like you think. I was praying that you would choose to save the town. Yes, I prayed that you would succeed, but the town is more important," Castiel explained. Dean was not expecting that answer. He let his grace go back to actively mingling with Castiel's. "You were?" he asked, softly. "These people," Castiel explained, "they're all our father's creations. They're works of art." Dean nodded in agreement. Castiel's grace wrapped around him reassuringly. "And yet, even though you stopped Samhain, the seal was broken and we are one step closer to hell on earth for all creation. You of all people should appreciate what that means." Waves of regret rolled off Dean. The feeling was so strong, he was unable to keep them in check. He felt Castiel sorting through his emotions and just let him. Let the young be confused and marvel at all the wrongness within him. There was disappointment and understanding at the shimmering energy of a multitude of ghosts skipping through his grace. Dean frowned. That was a little on the complex side for most angels. There was focus on his pain and suffering, both experienced and self-inflicted. He rolled his eyes as Castiel lingered on his loyalty and ability to love before shooing him along. He hated to admit it, but having another S grace moving through him was something he sorely missed. And Castiel's grace was so comfortable. Sweet, kind, loving, and so naive. It had been so long since Arapaho's grace had looked anything like that. He sighed and leaned further against Castiel, happily riding out his ghost high in comfort. A beautiful woman walked by, and he let his eyes follow her, lingering on her backside. He wouldn't mind taking her for a ride. As either a playmate or a meat suit. He hadn't been in such a pretty vessel since the 60s. Maybe he could grab a pretty vessel and parade around for Castiel someday. See if he was just as physically sweet and loving as his grace. What would the other angel find enticing? Did he even have preferences? There was a sudden pause from Castiel's perusal, and Dean brought his attention back. "I'll tell you something if you promise not to tell another soul," Castiel said, breaking the silence. Dean poked at Castiel's grace in curiosity. There was a complex heaviness there. "Okay. I am not a hammer, as you say. I have questions, I have doubts. I don't know what is right and what is wrong anymore and whether you passed or failed here. But, in the coming months, you will have more decisions to make. I don't envy the weight that's on your shoulders, Dean. I truly don't." He looked down at Dean, whose head still rested on his shoulder. Dean let out a sigh. "It's been a while," he said. "But I've had to make the big decisions before. It's not exactly new to me. I'll deal." Dean stared his reflection in the mirror. He couldn't believe how he had acted the previous day. Snuggling up against Castiel. Taking comfort from a stupid, young, attractive, stupid angel. And he wanted to do it again. He leaned heavily on the sink and hung his head. Had he really become that pathetic? He jumped when Sam banged on the bathroom door. "You alright in there?" Yeah, he grumbled as he opened the door. "All yours, princess." Dean threw himself on one of the beds and stared at the ceiling. When he heard the shower start, he let out a weary sigh, closed his eyes, and tried to concentrate. The whispers came slowly at first. Then he was able to decipher them. The angels were scrambling to different seals, handing out orders to guard the more easily broken, tracking demonic movements and odd omens. The occasional comment on the Winchester brothers and their current location would drift through. More whispers were coming through about Dean. He had been pulled out of hell. He had been chosen. Dean would be key to saving everything. Dean was. Dean came back to reality with a start. He stared up at Sam, who had a worried look on his face. "Sorry. Must be drifted off," he mumbled as he sat up. He rubbed a hand over his face. Things were not looking good. If the angels were gossiping about him, that meant more attention was being sent his way. He needed to be more careful. He would have to keep his powers tightly under wrap for the foreseeable future. With the way things were going, it would only be a matter of time until the cat was out of the bag. He watched Sam pack up the rest of their belongings and hoped Sam wouldn't hate him when he did find out. While investigating the wishing well, Dean could occasionally feel the presence of an angel. And it wasn't the same angel every time. They were taking turns watching him. It was beyond aggravating to know they were sitting there, doing nothing. Not bothering to lift a finger to help. The same thing happened when Sam and Dean went after a ghost. The angels were just lingering on the edges. Watching. Doing nothing. Not even throwing a scant bit of information to the brothers. As they left the town, Dean could feel the angels' visits becoming less frequent. He had mixed feelings on the turn of events. It was good that he would be getting some privacy, but bad in that it could only mean something big was up. And something big was up. In the form of Anna. At first, Dean thought she might be a prophet. That would explain why the demons wanted her. But then he met her. For a pretty prophet, she sure did feel wrong. It was as if she was empty. Just a vacant body meandering around. Her very presence made him itch. He stuttered as he spoke to her, trying to shut out the internal alarms that kept screaming wrong, wrong, wrong. Maybe they could dump her somewhere safe. Sam would be happy for her safety, and Dean would be rid of her presence. But they could use her. She seemed a little more aptly tuned to angel radio than he was at the moment. He could put up with a little discomfort for some insight. Things were going well enough when Ruby reared her ugly head. Oh, and did he detect a bit of real fear in her voice? Whoever the other demon was, he must have been hot shit to have Ruby actually worried. And as the demon drew closer, Dean's stomach dropped. Alistair threw Sam down the stairs and Dean attacked with a knife, hoping he was making the right decision and trusting Ruby enough to not harm Anna. As Dean struggled with Alistair, he was pushed into a beam. Alistair leaned in close and spoke softly, casually into Dean's ear. "Hello, Seraphiel." He leaned back and punched Dean. "Did you miss me?" Another punch. "I missed you." Sam came to Dean's rescue. With a quick glance between Alistair and the window, the brothers jumped out, Dean using his wings to slow their fall to something less damaging. Even with Sam's story, Dean was surprised to see Ruby. And he was angry at Anna for falling for Ruby's act as well. Was he surrounded by idiots? Demons were demons. The individual might have personal goals, but when it boiled down to it, they all worked for Lucifer and Hell's schemes. Sam was alive because Lucifer needed him alive. He had to bite back a harsh response when Anna mentioned contacting her parents, so he left it to Sam to break the news to her. In the middle of her breakdown, Dean felt the presence of angels coming closer, and Anna felt it, too. Anna was ushered to the other room, and the remaining three prepared for the worst. The door burst open and in walked Castiel. Castiel's shock swept over Dean. Questions of why he was with Anna bombarded him. When Dean probed back, seeking out why Castiel and Uriel were there, he was shut off. Even without being able to look into Castiel's grace, it was obvious he was hiding something from Dean. There was more to Anna than just her ability to tap into the angels' communications. Dean took a different route from his pokes and switched to a light caress. He was rewarded with an unconscious lip. A sliver of selfishness and unwillingness to share. Of wanting to follow orders because they came from higher up, switching to following for personal reasons. It was gone in a moment of self-realized shock and shame. Dean wearily eyed him. Relying on Castiel's abstract feelings without proper context left him anxious and uncertain of whether or not he could trust Castiel. When Uriel attacked the demon, Castiel used the distraction to go after Anna. With a simple touch, Sam was unconscious and posed no further threat. He grabbed the door handle just as a powerful banishing spell formed. Dean gritted his teeth as the spell pushed at his being. He looked for any crack in the spell to slip through and found one. With everything he had, he focused on every dark aspect of his being. Every evil thing he had done, all the demonic energy he had gained through his actions. He gasped as the spell ended and found himself coughing up a good deal of blood from the exertion. When he saw the mirror Anna had written the sigils on, it begged the question of where she had learned it. She was tapped into what the angels were saying, not Enochian spells. Dean was beginning to worry. Maybe he should have just handed her over to the angels. They decided to take her to Bobby's for safekeeping. With Anna hidden away in the panic room, Dean claimed to be in need of a nap. He secluded himself and tried to tap into angel radio. Anna was right, it was silent. But there were still soft murmurs floating about. They were looking for her. And something else. The angels were being vague, obviously trying to avoid tipping off Anna. He was pulled back by Sam shouting for him. Looking over Anna's psych file and proceeding to get caught, Sam suggested finding out just what Anna had done. He figured Pamela would be able to use her power to help them find answers. That was how Dean found himself on the doorstep of the psychic. Before he could knock, the door opened. "Pamela." He greeted. "Dean." She leaned against the doorframe and tilted her head to the side. "There's something different about you," she said as she raised a hand to Dean's cheek. "No, you've always been." She quickly took her hand back as if burned. Dean swallowed nervously. "You could have prevented this," she said bitterly and removed her sunglasses, showing off her false eyes. "He did warn you," he weakly replied. She let out a snort. "Yeah, but I am stubborn and want to back down from a challenge. I will say this though, I am a lot better than I used to be. Being blind has opened my eyes." She let a genuine smile graced her lips. "Thank you." "For what?" Dean asked, confused. "You're the first person to look at me and not be radiating pity. It's annoying," she complained. "Look, I know you're not sorry for what happened. You don't have to be. It's not your fault." Thanks. I guess." Dean shifted uncomfortably. "So, which angel are you? Anyone famous?" Dean's breath caught in his throat. He hadn't spoken his own name aloud in so long. "Sir Seraphiel. Leader of the Seraphim. Nice. Haven't been that for a long time," he commented quietly. "Don't. It'll be our little secret." They stood in silence for a solid minute before Pamela spoke again. "Did it hurt?" "Huh? When you fell from heaven?" she asked in a sweet tone. Dean stared at her, his mouth open and a dumbfounded look on his face. What?" Pamela chuckled at Dean's reaction. "Oh, come on. Can you blame me? When else am I gonna get a chance to use that line and mean it?" Dean shook his head and laughed. "Right. Very funny. Let us go, I'll explain on the way." Once in the Impala, Dean glanced sideways at Pamela. "And for the record, yes." Pamela turned her face towards Dean. "Pardon? When I fell. It hurt. A lot. But not in the way you're rethinking," he said and started the engine. Dean held the door open for Pamela. On the way to Bobby's, he explained how they had found Anna, about her knowing the blood magic, about how wrong and empty she felt. As they reached the door to the basement, Pamela placed a hand on Dean's shoulder. When he looked at her questioningly, she put a finger to her lips and gave him a smirk. He let out a short laugh and shook his head. It was hard to keep a smile off his face as Pamela messed with Sam. It made him feel a little better about the whole situation. Everything was going fine. Even the burst of energy was fine. Dean could even deal with being thrown across the room. He could not, however, deal with Anna's declaration of being an angel. There was just no way she could be an angel. She had no grace. There was nothing angelic about her. And Dean Coldenty believed that their father would truly want her dead. If anyone deserved his wrath, it was Dean. As she told her story, Dean tried to figure out just who she was. Without a grace, her powers were limited and her wings inaccessible. She claimed she fell, becoming human. Dean refused to believe it. How did she become human? Why was his grace still intact? Was he the special one or her? I ripped out my grace, she said. Dean flinched. Come again. Anna went on to explain what a grace was, not that Dean needed to know. He just couldn't imagine doing such a thing as ripping out his grace. No matter what. According to Ruby, hell wanted Anna because she was an angel bound to flesh that they could question. If that was what they wanted, then why hadn't they questioned Dean? He thought back to his time spent in hell and could recall only ever seeing Alistair and a couple of his most trusted minions during his torture sessions. Did anyone else in hell know? Dean drove Pamela home while Sam and Ruby looked for a way to find Anna's grace. I have to say, I was not expecting that, Pamela said, breaking the tense silence. Tell me about it. He gripped the steering wheel tighter. You're jealous, she said in revelation. Why? Why not? He yelled. My father gave the order to hunt her down. Hell wants her for information. I am not good enough for either of them. Auntie be jealous of her, Dean. She's scared. Everything she's done has been out of fear. You've been nothing but brave. Stupid, but brave, she said, laying a hand on Dean's knee. She ripped out her grace to avoid punishment and now she's trying to get it back so she can defend herself. What did you do when you fell? Dean pulled the car into Pamela's driveway. Trust me, Pam. You don't want to know the things I've done. I already know. What I am getting at is that you didn't hide. I don't know what the future holds, Dean, but things would probably be easier if you went back to not hiding. She exited the car and waited for Dean. Dean sighed in irritation and got out to walk her to her door. Pamela stepped in and turned back to face Dean. Can I make one request? In case we never see each other again. Dean bit his lip and thought. Sure. Can I see your wings? I might not get another chance to see an angel's wings. I'd they're not a good example, Dean said, lamely. Would you even be able to see em? Pamela simply smiled sweetly at him and waited patiently. Dean let out a frustrated growl and unfurled his wings, looking off to the side in embarrassment. He flinched as he heard Pamela gasp. Beautiful, she said softly and reached up to cup Dean's cheek. Thank you, Seraphiel. She leaned up and placed a kiss on his lips before leaving him alone and confused on the doorstep. When Dean got back, he found Anna staring up at the night sky. He figured he would see if she knew anything about just why he was dragged out of hell, but she didn't know. As they spoke, she admitted to not wanting to go back. She wanted out and Dean wanted back in. He wondered if it was because she had no grace. She didn't have to feel the longing he felt. A need to be back in his father's presence, to feel his love. When Anna said only 4 angels had seen God, he had to think for a moment. He had seen his father Michael, Gabriel, Raphael, Lucifer, Metatron, Azrael, all of the seraphim, many more than just 4. He had assumed all of the angels, no matter their class nor rank, were granted an audience. They need only ask. As Anna explained how things worked in heaven, he began to have doubts. Nothing seemed right. You weren't killed for questioning when he was last in heaven. What was going on? When had the rules changed? Sam had located where Anna's grace had landed. Her pure grace had spawned a beautiful oak tree. Dean tried to imagine what his would create. Nothing good, he supposed. When they reached ground zero, Dean could feel the trace of an angel's grace, but nothing to indicate it was actually there. Not a good sign. And now the angels were threatening to throw Dean back in hell. He wanted to scream in frustration. What was going on up there? Who was giving the orders? Why was Anna so set on thinking she deserved to be punished for disobeying? Yes, Lucifer disobeyed, but he also started a riot. He had gathered a small army of angels to eradicate their father's newest creations. The full-on rebellion leading to such heavy casualties that it apparently tipped heaven's systems and hierarchy on its head. It went a little further than abandoning a post. Seraphiel had stuck by Lucifer. Even when he didn't agree, he stuck by his older brother. And he paid for it. Banished, cut off, ignored. He suffered for his actions and was still suffering. When he spoke of deserving punishment, he hadn't meant punishment for torturing souls in hell. But that was what Anna assumed and insisted it was not Dean's fault. What did she know? He wasn't exactly forced to do it. He got sick of being tortured himself. And wasn't that the reason souls went to hell? To be tortured. As Anna stroked Dean's cheek, he began to feel alone again. There was one fleeting moment when he first found out she was an angel, that maybe there was another that could understand. But he was wrong. She had no idea what it was to fall. Not the way he had fallen. To remember everything. To feel his grace slowly corrupt. To be reminded every time he caught sight of his wings out of the corner of his eye. And then she kissed him. It was nice, but Dean couldn't block out the emptiness she irradiated. He gave her a stuttered apology and headed back to the others. When he got back it was to find out that Ruby was missing. Well, there was part 1 of Sam's grand plan. He hoped he wouldn't have too long to wait to play his own part. Dean sat at the table across from Sam and watched him sleep. After a while, he started feeling tired. His body wanted him to sleep. It would seem that an angel was trying to get into his dreams. He let sleep take him, hoping that Castiel would make it quick. He felt a little bad that he was about to use Castiel. He could just tell Castiel the plan, but could Dean trust him? What greeted him was not Castiel. He was not in the mood to deal with Uriel. He jabbed at Uriel's pride, knowing the other angel didn't like taking orders from a young, naive angel. Why see, he has this weakness, he likes you, Uriel said in response. Dean was instantly reminded of cuddling up to Castiel. He shifted uncomfortably, tucking and hiding all thoughts of Castiel away. Especially the thrill that went through him. Uriel made his demands, showed off his trophy, and, with Anna's kiss still fresh in Dean's mind, assumed Dean had gotten a slice of angel pie. Dean rolled his eyes. He played along, wanting nothing more than for the conversation to stop. Uriel threatened, and Dean called his bluff. And then, Uriel threatened Sam. Dean's obvious weakness. So Dean gave in and told Uriel where they were hiding. When Uriel finally left and Dean awoke, he considered Pamela's words. Maybe it was time he stopped hiding. As a last resort, he decided. The barn doors flew open, and Castiel and Uriel entered. Dean watched as Castiel's eyes landed on him and Anna. As Castiel's wings spread out more, Dean stepped closer to Anna. He quietly reached out to Castiel's grace and was answered with regret over Uriel's actions and threats. He tuned back in beyond simply playing his part when Anna kissed him. That wasn't part of the script. He blinked in surprise at her soft smile. He glanced at Castiel, who had looked away and gleaned nothing from his grace. Castiel apologized for his orders and Anna pointed out that he wasn't sorry. Dean glanced around the barn. What was taking so long? He closed his eyes and prepared to make what would rank high up on the list of stupid things he had done. If Anna thought Castiel wasn't truly sorry for having to obey orders, how would she feel about Dean's complete lack of regret for using her? If she felt any remote semblance to human emotion, how much would she regret kissing him? He exhaled slowly. Until you touch a hair on that poor girl's head. Dean spun around at the sound of Alistair's voice. Finally. He had never been so glad to see Alistair. Just as planned, angel and demon fought. Dean caught sight of Castiel losing his fight to Alistair. He should just leave. Castiel would be able to take care of himself. Dean growled at himself as he lifted a 2x4 and hit Alistair upside the head, earning him Alistair's attention. He stood his ground as pain ripped through his being. Dean hadn't noticed that Anna had managed to procure her grace from Uriel. As she screamed for them to shut their eyes, Dean watched her change from an empty shell to a full-fledged angel. Unfamiliar wings formed and her holy essence burned through her mortal body. It was over, even if Uriel didn't want it to be. Castiel held Uriel back from attacking Dean, and Dean let out an exhausted sigh after the two angels left. He didn't know what to think. He was torn between being happy for Anna and wanting to scream. She got her grace back. She would be able to go home. Dean, on the other hand, was stuck on Earth. Stuck on Earth and called upon for some holy mission no one wanted to tell him about. With a quick goodbye to Ruby, Sam and Dean were back on the road. A few hunts had cropped up and vague and detailed messages alike were left on their voicemail. Dean needed a distraction. He broke out the beers during a short break in driving. Anna had been a painful reminder of what he had lost and would never regain. In between beers, Dean chose to tell Sam about his time in hell. If Sam could accept Dean for what he'd done in hell, then maybe he stood a chance of being forgiven for his other crimes. Dean left Sam at a motel just outside of a small town. He was thankful that Sam didn't question him when he said he'd be back by morning. He let Sam think it was stress over being reminded of hell and losing a relationship with Anna. Was he really that much of a horn dog? Yeah. He was. He had his vices. Dean drove away from the town. Part of him wanted to just keep going. Leave everything behind. He pulled off to the side of the road and got out. Leaning against the Impala, he stared at the stars. What do you want, Cos? Dean asked when Castiel appeared beside him. I thought you might like to know that Anna is safe, Castiel replied with some difficulty. Back home, living the good life. Good for her, Dean spat out. Castiel gave Dean a confused look. No, she has been avoiding us. Dean finally looked at Castiel. So, not accepted back into the fold. Not as such. But she still gets to go back. She will be punished when she does. You're missing the point, cause. Dean shouted as he turned and took a step towards Castiel. She gets to go back. I don't. He breathed deeply when Castiel reached out with his grace. He allowed the soft touch, and his breath escaped in a whimper when Castiel's grace fully enveloped him. He needed more. He closed the distance between them and pulled Castiel into a hug. Castiel tensed, then slowly brought his arms up and wrapped them around Dean. Have you tried to come back? Dean pulled back and gave Castiel a furious look. He extended his wings as far as he could, displaying every flaw for Castiel to see. He grabbed the lapels of Castiel's coat and brought him closer. Yeah, I wasn't exactly welcomed with open arms. He watched as Castiel's eyes darted across his wings. Dean's breath stuttered at the sorrow directed at him. He flinched as Castiel reached his hand up and gently stroked what was left of one of his smaller wings. They shouldn't have done this to you, Castiel said, his voice laced with sadness. Dean shivered and tightened his grip. Castiel brought his gaze back to Dean's eyes. I am truly sorry for what happened to you. Dean was taken aback. With Castiel's grace mingling with his own, he could feel the sincerity in Castiel's words. When he felt a hand rest on his neck just beneath his jaw, he gave up on self-control and kissed Castiel. He sucked and nipped at Castiel's lips. It was so different from kissing Anna. There was no emptiness, no wrongness. Surprise and desire flitted from Castiel into Dean, egging him on. Dean smiled into the kiss as Castiel tried to participate. He caught images of how much Castiel had seen humans do with each other, and he sent little promises back. He'd be more than happy to be Castiel's sex-ed teacher. It was when Dean's hands made it to Castiel's belt that he felt Castiel's distress over his inexperience flare up. Dean stilled, breathing heavily. He pulled away, looking at Castiel in trepidation. He had managed to loosen Castiel's tie even more. Castiel's shirt was unbuttoned and untucked, and his belt was partially undone. Dean could see the growing erection straining against loose fabric. He looked at Castiel's face, tinted a rosy pink. What was he doing? Castiel's grace was pulsating about him with what was clearly desire. Dean really wanted to fulfill that desire. But he couldn't. He couldn't do that to Castiel. Castiel was so pure and innocent, Dean couldn't bring himself to drag Castiel down and corrupt him. Dean? Castiel frowned at Dean's silence. He reached out to touch Dean. Dean stepped back and flew off before it was too late. Before Castiel could reel him back in. Dean tripped as he landed. Thousands of years, and he still hadn't mastered flying with only 2 wings. He blamed it on their tatty appearance. He had landed in the middle of a forest, far from civilization and away from any supernatural creatures. He kicked at a nearby tree before leaning against it. He wondered how long Castiel would wait before giving up. He slid down the tree trunk and sat on the ground. He pulled his knees up and buried his face in his arms. Was this all part of a test? Was he even being tested? Had Castiel been sent to tempt him? Did it even matter? He felt like he was so far gone that nothing he did would ever redeem him in his father's eyes. The night passed slowly, and when sunlight began peeking through the trees, Dean finally stood. He stretched and extended his wings. He risked a look and was dismayed at the mess behind him. He should really do something about them. Who was he kidding? Who was he trying to impress, anyway? Castiel? He blushed at the thought of primping his wings for Castiel. He shook the thought from his mind and took off in the direction of his car. Castiel was leaning against the Impala, waiting patiently. Occasionally, a passing driver would ask if he needed assistance. He perked up when he felt Dean's return. He stood and looked to the wooded area just off the side of the road. A loud crack resounded, followed by a pained shout. Son of a bitch. Dean emerged from the woods, brushing leaves and twigs from his person. He froze in his ministrations and looked up at Castiel like a deer caught in headlights. Castiel appeared directly in front of Dean. When Dean made no move to fly off again, Castiel reached up and plucked a small twig from Dean's hair. He kept his eyes trained on Dean's and slowly, carefully touched Dean's grace. But he was quickly shut out and physically pushed away. He stumbled as he regained his balance. Just stop it, all right. Dean said desperately. Stop what? Castiel asked, sending his confusion to Dean. This everything. Stop being so nice. So you. Dean ran a hand through his hair and gave it a surprised look when he pulled out a leaf. This is how our father made me. I do not know how else to be, Castiel replied. Dean shook his head and let the leaf fall. I can do this, cause. Castiel searched Dean's eyes, looking for any clues he might find. He was beginning to wish he had shown more interest in humans, learned their mannerisms. Humans were such physical and tonal creatures, and Seraphiel seemed to have completely adapted. Castiel was in over his head. I don't understand, he admitted. Dean let out a frustrated sigh. Look, you're nice. And pure. Fuck, you're so damned. I can drag you down. You don't deserve that. Castiel tilted his head in question. Dean tried to walk past Castiel, but Castiel grabbed his arm and spun Dean to face him. Dean held his breath, his eyes wide and searching Castiel's. Castiel held Dean in place, staring into his eyes. He tried to read what was there, comparing the look to every human reaction he could remember. He settled on hope and fear. Castiel brought his wings possessively around Dean and pressed their lips together. It held none of the passion from their first kiss, but sweet reassurance. When Castiel pulled back, he gave Dean a small smile, still an unfamiliar expression for him. I can take care of myself, Dean, he said. And, if I fall, I know you will catch me. Castiel reached up and wiped a tear from Dean's cheek. He hugged Dean tightly as Dean buried his face in Castiel's neck. If they find out, it won't be good. Trust me, Dean warned, his voice slightly muffled. They stayed like that until Dean's phone rang. Dean jumped and pulled his phone out, reading Sam's name on the small screen. He cleared his throat and plastered a big smile on his face before answering. Sammy. Hey, I was just on my way. Castiel watched as Dean gave Sam an excuse for being out all night. He thought about Dean's warning. What would happen if and when the others did find out? He would have to keep his interactions with Dean a secret. Both for his sake and for Dean's. Dean said his goodbye to Sam and turned to Castiel. So, I gotta go get my brother, he said. Will you be alright? I will be fine. Thank you for your concern, Dean. Dean laughed at Castiel's statement. Yeah. God, I hope I was never like that, he said, mostly to himself. Go on, get out of here. Goodbye, Dean. I will return when I have time, Castiel promised. Before flying off, he tenderly stroked Dean's grace and felt the small bursts of elation and worry. Dean found Sam waiting for him inside the small motel room. Ready to head out? He asked, as nonchalantly as he could manage. Where were you? Sam asked. I've been trying to call you for hours. And don't say your phone was off. Dean couldn't come up with an excuse quick enough. I was abducted by an angel. It was partially true. Sam stood straighter. Oh. Was it Castiel? Dean nodded, not trusting his voice and hoping he wasn't blushing. Well, what did he want? Did he say anything about Anna? Why yeah. She's good. She's fine. Hiding out somewhere, Dean replied. Sam's relief at the news was palpable. Good. Bobby called, he said, changing the subject. Got a hunt for us? Dean asked, perking up. He desperately wanted to kill something. Kill something or fuck something. He wasn't exactly picky at the moment. Not really, Sam replied, grabbing his duffel and tossing the other to Dean. One of the hunters that died during the rising of the witnesses apparently, he left everything to Bobby. He wants us to help sift through everything. Dean sagged. Aw, Simon. Sorry, I already promised him we'd help, Sam said a little too cheerfully for Dean's taste. Besides, I thought we could use a break from demons and hunting. After a long drive, they arrived at Bobby's. Upon stepping into the house, they were greeted with piles of boxes. Bobby was having a hard time getting even the boxes sorted, so many were filled to the brim with books, trinkets and smaller boxes. And none of them were marked. Sam came up with their game plan, dividing the living room into subcategories. Soon, small piles were forming. Dean had taken it upon himself to place little signs above each pile. Demons, ghosts, vampires, shifters. Sam gave Dean a look when he noticed the badly drawn stick figures next to each title. Hey, I am a visual learner, Dean said defensively. Sam rolled his eyes, but didn't say anything as he returned to the box he was currently working on. Dean was bored out of his mind, but Bobby needed the help. And they had already found so many useful books. Little bits of knowledge to help them along in the future. Sam was hopeful that they would find something to help them with the apocalypse and the seals. After about 3 more hours of sorting, Sam left for a food run. Dean yelled out a reminder to get pie. He grumbled to himself about Sam forgetting pie the last time he made a food run. He flipped the pages of the book in his hands. Another one for the pagan deity pile. He sighed as Bobby dropped another box next to him. What? No break? He asked, looking up to give Bobby a pitiful pout. Don't think I haven't noticed you slacking off, Bobby replied before returning to his desk. Dean frowned. He wasn't slacking off. He couldn't help it if he could go through a book a lot more quickly than a human. He picked up a new book, a particularly heavy leather-bound tome, and flipped through the pages more slowly. At least this one had a lot of pictures in it. Sam returned with the food. Dean happily took the pie off his brother's hands, guarding it from potential thieves as he ate his cheeseburger. And then it was back to the monotony of sorting. About an hour in, Sam let out a low whistle. Hope we never run into this guy, he said, slowly turning the pages of the book he held. What guy? Dean asked distractedly. Seraphiel. Dean's head shot up, eyes wide and staring at Sam. No. No 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 no. Huh. Never heard of him, Bobby replied, not bothering to look up. Not surprising, really. He just vanished around 400 or 500 years ago. 438 years ago, Seraphiel gave up on getting his father's attention. Dean remembered the day well. So, don't need to worry about him, right? But the damn apocalypse going on, Bobby asked, incredulously. Everything's coming out of the woodwork. For all we know, this Seraphiel's gonna be the next hunt. Dean certainly hoped not. Well, Sam. Does it say anything about any signs? Anything to give us a heads up in case we do run into him? Bobby asked. Sam flipped the pages back and forth, frowning. I think he's an angel. An angel, Bobby repeated flatly. Yeah, fallen angel. But it looks like he has all his powers, unlike Anna. Oh, he always has green eyes. Dean paled. People paid attention to that sort of stuff. So, interrogate everyone with green eyes. He said jokingly, hoping his voice wasn't wavering as much as he thought it was. Sam shook his head, eyes still glued to the book in his hands. Bobby let out a snort. Sure, we'll start with you, he said and went back to his book. Dean couldn't make his voice work. His eyes darted between the two hunters, then he looked down at the box next to his feet. He busied himself with sorting the amulets. I don't get it, Sam said after a while. Seraphiel's all over the place. 1 minute he's starting orgies at convents. Dean smiled to himself. Possessing that none was a good memory. A fun memory. Spanking may have been involved. And the next, he's ridding a town of a demon problem. I thought you said he was a bad guy. Bobby stood up and looked over Sam's shoulder. He started at least 50 wars between peaceful nations, and that's what he admitted to, Sam replied. Burned down hundreds of churches. Dean frowned. The churches were empty. Well, empty of innocents. He never personally killed an innocent. Not a real innocent. Then again, he could name hundreds of wicked leaders that never personally killed anyone. Lucifer never had the chance to do much damage. If Lucifer was simply locked away, what fate awaited Seraphiel? Started witch hunts where there weren't any witches, started the Spanish Inquisition, several holy wars. Seraphiel the manipulator. He let humans kill each other off, introduced them to demons. Oh. What? Bobby and Dean spoke at the same time. Bobby in interest, Dean in dread. A possible sign that he's in an area. It says he's extremely territorial. Ghosts, demons, everything. Find a human settlement with no supernatural activity and there's a good chance he's there was there. Bobby stared over Sam's shoulder in silence. Wasn't he there? Well, shit. What's wrong? Sam asked. Ellen called about a week ago. Said that some hunters going to Elm Creek, Nebraska ended up with nothing. Vampires fled the town. Demons want to go near the place, Bobby explained. No idea when it started. Dean bit his lip. He wasn't counting on having his breakdown come back to bite him in the ass. Sam looked up at Bobby, then to Dean. Elm Creek. We were just there, he said. Do you think Seraphiel was there because of us? Could he be working with Lucifer? No, Dean replied without thinking. He shifted his gaze from the box of amulets to Sam. Should he just come right out and admit everything? If things got too heated, he could always just fly away. No, he couldn't do it. He couldn't lose Sam. Pamela may have been accepting, but she had a whole new outlook on life and hadn't known Dean all her life. Sam wouldn't take Dean's angelic side very well. I dunno. Maybe he was there because of us. With all these angels running around, maybe he was in town for a family reunion. Sam quirked a brow in suspicion. Maybe he went to Chevyland, Dean suggested. I highly doubt that. Dean rolled his eyes at Sam's lack of enthusiasm. It was a great museum. So many beautiful classic cars on display. But when thinking of any other angel, then, yeah. He could see Sam's doubt in an angel having any interest in it. His loss, he said and went back to sifting through the box. Sam had to know if they were really dealing with Seraphiel. If they were, then he wanted to be prepared for the worst. Later that night, he called Ruby and met up with her just outside Bobby's property. Do you know anything about what happened in Elm Creek? Sam asked when Ruby walked into view. She stopped in her tracks and tensed up. I heard something, she admitted. There was a survivor. A demon saw the massacre from a distance. He said it was an angel, but its wings were the color of blood. He was cruel, ruthless. Just tore into them, sealed them in their bodies, and made them beg for death. They're calling him the demon angel. Sam tilted his head slightly. Wings. You can see their wings? He asked. Yeah. An angel can see my real face and I can see an angel's wings, she explained. Look, Sam, don't go after him. Just stay away. Everything in that area died. Painfully. The town was evacuated. She gave a nervous laugh. Everyone I've talked to is being real careful. Angels, we can feel common from a good distance. We can get away. But this thing, there was no warning. That survivor, he said it felt almost like a demon. I was lucky. It happened the day after Dean found out about you using your powers. I could have been killed. Sam let out a sigh. At least it didn't seem like Seraphiel was helping Lucifer's cause. He promised Ruby that he would be careful and avoid the demon angel at all costs. He was worried. Dean definitely had to know something. Did Dean run into Seraphiel that day? Sam and Ruby parted ways, and Dean's eyes followed Sam's path back to the house. A survivor. He must be getting rusty. Dean closed his eyes and shook his head. No. He shouldn't be thinking like that. He flew back to the house, managing to knock over only one pile of books, and curled up in his spot on the floor. He listened as Sam quietly opened the door and entered the old house. Dean could feel Sam's eyes on his back, and he hoped Sam would just let it go. He didn't want to deal with any questions Sam was bound to have in the morning. Morning came and went. Sam kept trying to ask Dean about Seraphiel, but Dean kept finding excuses to leave. The piles of boxes were slowly being cleared out, and the room was beginning to look more organized. Unless it was a pile made by Dean. Sam sighed in frustration as he straightened another Dean pile. He thought he heard fluttering wings, but assumed Dean had returned from the basement and was flipping through another book. Hello Sam. Sam spun around and came face to face with Castiel. See Castiel hi. Castiel looked around the room in curiosity. Did you need something? Sam asked, trying to get Castiel's attention. Your brother, Castiel replied, still not looking at Sam. In the basement. He's helping Bobby put up some new sigils in the panic room. Sam bit his lip at Castiel's lack of reaction. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw the book from the previous night. Oh. Hey, just out of curiosity, what do you know about an angel named Seraphiel? Sam was not expecting the intense stare his question had earned him. Why? Castiel asked, his voice laced with suspicion and caution. Well, we came across a book with him in it and it looked like he'd been in a town around the same time as Dean and me, Sam explained, not wanting to mention Ruby. Castiel tilted his head in consideration. Seraphiel's actions need not concern you. So it was him. Do you know what he wants? Is he helping Lucifer? Sam asked. How do we defend ourselves against him? I believe Seraphiel would never harm you, Sam, Castiel replied. Seraphiel is. Pause. Castiel turned his head in Dean's direction. Hello Dean. We need your help. Sam sagged in annoyance. And then he saw it. The way Castiel was looking at Dean. It was muted, but he had seen his brother receive that look from hundreds of women and a number of men as well, over the years. Even from Anna. Great. The angel had a crush on his older brother. He hoped Dean was not some sort of angel catnip. That would be more trouble than it was worth. Don't know if I really want to give my help, why no, Dean replied. The seal is being threatened, Castiel explained. And we have no way of stopping it. Really? None at all, Dean said sarcastically. Alistair has one Reaper already. If he catches another, he will break the seal. Still not getting the part where you can stop him. The demons are hiding in a building that has been warded against angels. We cannot enter it. Angel-proofed. Dean wondered if he would be able to get past the wards. If he could escape an angel banishment spell, then he should be able to slip through a few wards. Another reminder of how low he'd gone. He sighed and scratched his head. I dunno Sammy. What? Of course we'll help. Just tell us where. I can do better than tell you, Castiel said as he touched the brother's shoulders. Sam took a step back, looking around at the new room. How he trailed off when he caught sight of Dean. Dean was gripping Castiel's arm and shoulder, barely standing on his own. Don't you ever do that again, he warned. Just say something next time. If there was one thing Dean hated more than flying via airplane, it was being dragged along by another angel. Castiel looked down at Dean and sent an apologetic wave along his grace. Dean grunted as he regained his footing, letting his hand linger on Castiel's arm longer than was needed. Sam's mouth quirked in a confused smile. Dean looked up at Sam and saw the look he was receiving. What? Sam replied with a questioning look between Dean and Castiel. Shut up. Dean growled, feeling his cheeks burn. Castiel looked from Dean to Sam. Is something wrong? He asked. Everything's fine, Dean replied without taking his eyes off Sam. When satisfied, he finally turned to Castiel. So, where are we? Wyoming. The demons have the Reaper in a building 3 miles from here, Castiel replied, his full attention back on Dean. And one more thing, we need Alistair alive. Get him out of the building, and we'll take care of the rest. What about weapons? Sam asked. The look Dean gave him made him smile. It was the same look he got whenever airplanes were mentioned. Cause, can you take me back to Bobby S. so I can load up? Of course, Castiel said, placing a hand on Sam's shoulder. Dean only had to wait 5 minutes before Sam and Castiel returned. Right. Let us go kill some demons, Dean said, taking the knife from Sam. The building they stakes out was heavily warded. Dean felt a spike of unease as he and Sam approached the building. Every surface was covered with spells. He waited as Sam went to peek in through the windows. How many? Dean asked when Sam returned. He was having trouble feeling his way past the warding. At least 4, Sam said. Maybe we should have come up with a better plan. Or at least call in some backup. Dean grunted in reply. He tested his senses against another ward and slipped through. 7 demons. And 2 reapers. Shit. There's no time. Dean exclaimed as he started for the door. Sam gaped as his brother hurried away. Wait. Dean, by the time his legs started moving, Dean was already pushing at the door with some difficulty. Dean gritted his teeth as the door burned him. He shifted his grace and threw his darker energies forward, blasting through the spell placed on the door. He rushed inside, Sam hot on his heels, and went straight to where he could feel the reapers being kept. Dean made quick work of the demons that crossed his path. The demon rushed towards Dean, and Dean swiftly sidestepped, spun, and stabbed the demon in the neck, not losing pace. He didn't need to look at his opponent, just felt them out with his senses and relied on instinct. By the time they reached the main room, Dean had taken out 4 demons. He caught Sam staring at him, but he had no time to come up with an excuse for his sudden proficiency in fighting. As Dean Winchester, he was good, but not that good. He moved his eyes back to the room and pointed, relying on the urgency of their task to distract Sam. In the center of the room were the reapers, lying in the middle of a painted sigil. Sam raised his gun as Dean shouted at the 2 demons performing the spell. Alistair ceased his chanting and looked directly at Dean. Will wonders never cease? He said, giving Dean a sickly grin. You're just full of surprises. Dean glared at the demon. Alistair. I thought you got burned up. Oh, the pediatrician did. His wife's still looking for him, Alistair replied as his grin grew. Dean growled and took a step forward, but quickly turned back when he heard Sam let out a pained grunt. A 3rd demon stood over Sam's unconscious body. It would seem you missed one, Alistair pointed out in a helpful tone. Dean slowly raised his eyes to the demon. I noticed. Before the demon could react, Dean was on him, pressing a hand to his head. The demon screamed in agony, and Dean quickly turned, throwing the knife and hitting the other lower demon between the eyes. Alistair applauded. I do love to watch you work, he admitted. He stood his ground when Dean appeared inches in front of him. You can be that much of an angel if you manage to get in here. Join us. Help us free your brother. After all, he's the reason you're here. Sam grabbed his head and let out a soft groan as he slowly sat up. He blinked in confusion at the sight before him. Dean had Alistair by the throat and was punching him. Alistair laughed as he flung Dean halfway across the room. Come on. You can do better than that. Dean had rolled when he hit the floor and was upright again. The lights flickered and shadowed wings extended along the wall behind him. Sam's stomach dropped. There was an angel riding his brother. Was this part of some plan he hadn't been let in on? Did the angels use his brother to get them past the warding? So beautiful, Alistair said softly. There's a reason I never touched them. The comment seemed to have spurred whoever was inside Dean into action. The shadows on the wall disappeared and Alistair scowled in disappointment. Dean charged at him, throwing them both through the window and into the back alley. Sam stumbled as he got up and ran to the broken window. He stared as both Dean and Alistair stood up. He brought his gun up and aimed as Alistair gave him a brief glance and smiled. My dear Seraphiel, Alistair said sweetly, heaven will never take you back. And humans, they could never love you. I've seen your grace, so beautiful, so many evil deeds. God will never forgive you. But, Lucifer loves you. He loves you so much. Sam's breath caught. Seraphiel. Seraphiel was in his brother. He had to save Dean. Seraphiel stood stock still, breathing heavily. Sam worried at the emotions warring across his face. Castiel had said Seraphiel would not harm him, but he said nothing against Seraphiel joining Lucifer. Nothing about him stealing his brother's body. Seraphiel looked up at Alistair, looking lost and confused. Alistair held his arms out invitingly. Sam and Seraphiel jumped as lightning struck Alistair, leaving nothing in his place. Hey. Seraphiel. Sam shouted, raising his shotgun at his brother's head. He almost dropped it at the look of sheer shock on Dean's face. Get out of my brother. Sam said as he came closer. What? No, Sam, it's not what you think. Seraphiel said, putting his hands up in front of him. Get out. Sam, please, just listen, he pleaded. Tears ran down Sam's face. Was this what it was like? To see a demon wearing someone you loved, acting just like them, but knowing it wasn't them. Dean wouldn't want Sam to let a demon nor an angel run around in his body. So Sam closed his eyes and pulled the trigger. When he opened his eyes, the street was vacant. He breathed in sharply as Castiel appeared beside him. "Did you know?" Sam asked, shaking in anger. "Did you know about Seraphiel?" "Yes. Why didn't you tell me?" "Dean had me promise." Sam gestured to the spot Seraphiel had vacated. "That was not Dean. That was Seraphiel. And you knew." Sam yelled, the betrayal in his voice evident. "You knew." "Sam. No. Unless you know how to get a fallen angel out of a human, then I don't wanna hear it." Castiel looked down, avoiding Sam's glare. "Unless it is willingly, then no. I don't," he said. Sam rubbed at his eyes in frustration. "Fine. I'll see if I can find anything." Can you find him?" "The Seraphiel is very good at evading detection," Castiel explained. "But I will do everything in my power to locate your brother." Sam sighed and looked at the night sky, feeling lost. He just got Dean back, only to lose him again. He felt a hand on his shoulder and was suddenly back in Bobby's living room. He was thankful that Castiel chose not to stick around. He looked around the room. Everything was the same. He looked down at the pile he had been working on earlier. He leaned over and picked up a piece of paper. On it was Dean's scrawling handwriting, declaring the pile was for angels. Next to the title was a badly drawn dragon with 6 wings. Sam frowned at the image. The weeks passed painfully slow for Sam. Nothing in his research was helpful. He found hundreds of ways to solve his problem, had it been a demon. Which, yeah, would be useful down the line, but not what he needed right now. He had seen firsthand how to take care of an angel. But Seraphiel. Castiel had explained how Seraphiel was able to work past devil's traps and angelic seals. The spell Anna had used wouldn't work. As far as he could tell, Seraphiel was a mix of angel, demon, and human. Sam thought about it and came to the conclusion that Seraphiel was the perfect weapon. Whichever side won his loyalty would have an edge. He could go anywhere. But none of it mattered. There was no sign of Seraphiel. Castiel was showing up more frequently, each time a little more distressed. Sam didn't know if Castiel's worry was for Dean or for Seraphiel. Every time he confronted the angel, Castiel would give Sam a sad look and not answer. Then one day, Castiel brought up some disturbing news. "Someone is killing angels," Castiel said as he slumped onto a chair. "What? How? Who is doing it? Is it Seraphiel?" Castiel refused to look at Sam. "I don't know. Uriel is insisting a demon is behind the deaths." But he sighed as he shook his head. "I do not believe that Seraphiel is the cause. He is capable of a great many things, but not the deaths of his brothers and sisters. Not anymore. Not without true provocation." "How can you be so sure?" Sam asked. Castiel met Sam's eyes and replied, "Because I know him. I've felt his grace." Sam looked away, thinking. I can ask Ruby if she knows anything," he offered. Castiel grimaced. "You should stay away from her, Sam. Do you have any better ideas?" Sam snapped. "We have been interrogating Alistair," but Castiel trailed off and looked away. "Part of the reason I am here is to ask Dean to assist." Sam stared at Castiel. The angels wanted Dean to help them interrogate Alistair. Why would they? "Oh. You want him to torture Alistair?" Castiel hung his head. "No. I do not want this. These are my orders." "God wants Dean to torture a demon for information?" Sam asked, disbelief heavy in his voice. Castiel didn't answer. He didn't want to believe that his father would want this. That his father would let Seraphiel dirty his grace further with torture. But the orders they made no mention of Seraphiel so far. Just Dean Winchester. Nothing about the fallen angel. There were no rumors about Seraphiel. Surely, someone besides himself knew. God knew where all his children were, so he had to know that Dean Winchester and Seraphiel were one and the same. If that was the case, then who was giving the orders? Castiel suddenly stood, making Sam jump. "I must go," he said, and left with a soft flutter. After Castiel had left, Sam decided he should speak with Ruby before heading to the local library. The books he had requested had come in, and he hoped they might hold some sliver of information. He wasn't going to hold his breath. Sam returned from the library, still feeling a deep touch of disappointment from meeting with Ruby. She didn't know anything about demons killing angels. He didn't want to tell her about Dean, fearing that she might push the demon blood subject even harder now that Dean wasn't there to bully her away. He placed the bag of library books on Bobby's desk as Bobby offered him a beer. Sam gratefully took the bottle as he sorted through the books. Near the bottom of the bag was a worn paperback. He pulled it out and raised his brow at the cover. Supernatural. The cover made it look like some sort of homoerotic thriller. He turned it over and read the back, wondering how it ended up on his list. Along a lonely California highway, a mysterious woman in white lures men to their deaths, a terrifying phenomenon that may be Sam and Dean's first clue to their father's whereabouts. Sam reread the text several times. He opened the book at random and began reading. Everything written had happened just as he remembered it. For a brief moment, Sam completely forgot all his other problems. Some quick research revealed there were more of the supernatural books, much to Sam's confused dismay. He needed to find this Carver Edlund. Unfortunately, it was just a pen name, so he went to the publisher. Convincing the publisher that Sam was a fan of the Supernatural series was nowhere near as difficult as convincing the writer that he really was Sam Winchester. Tuck Shirley obviously wanted nothing to do with Sam, declaring him a crazy fan. A crazy fan who happened to look exactly how he envisioned Sam, just happened to know Sam and Dean's surname, and knew about Seraphiel. It was with Seraphiel's name that Sam gained entry into Chuck's home. As Sam looked around the messy living room, the sound of fluttering wings filled the air. He saw Chuck cringe and make a beeline for the fridge. Castiel appeared behind Sam. Saw. He stopped mid-word and stared at Chuck. Tuck had just returned with a bottle of Jägermeister in his hand. He miserably returned Castiel's stare. So it's true then. I am a prophet. Wait. A prophet? Sam looked between Chuck and Castiel. Cause, did you know? Castiel ignored Sam's question and approached Chuck. It is an honor to meet you. Tuck gave Castiel a dismissive nod and hurried to his recliner. What's going on? Sam asked the room in general. I went Vonnegut on my latest book, Chuck replied. I never should have written myself in. And as a prophet, what was I thinking? That SM night levels of douchiness. Castiel looked up from the book he was reading. Changing the words you write would have no effect, he explained. Luke tried. Tuck glared at Castiel. You're more annoying in person, he said testily. Castiel frowned and picked up another book to look through. Okay, so you're a prophet, Sam said, focusing on Chuck. You know everything about Dean and me. Do you know where he is right now? Chuck opened the bottle and looked up at Sam. Yeah. At Sam's relieved expression, he continued. But look, I don't know how to say this. He got up and went over to his desk. He sifted through the piles of paper, then pulled out a set that had been paper clipped together. He handed them to Sam. You're not gonna like this, he said as he went back to his chair and took a deep swig of his drink. Sam's brows furrowed in confusion. He glanced at the first page and recognized it as the night Seraphiel had disappeared with Dean's body. He read through it several times, shaking more with each read through. Sam dropped the papers and ran his hands down his face, trying to calm down. He angrily knocked a pile of books to the floor. How long? How long has Seraphiel been inside Dean? Sam asked, voice tight. Tuck took another sip before answering. The soul that would have been Dean Winchester was born in the next available body, he explained. Seraphiel took over the corpse at birth. Sam stared speechlessly at Chuck. He wasn't expecting that. P.S. Seraphiel has always been Dean, Castiel said. He has always been your brother. Sam's legs gave out and he collapsed against the wall for support. But he has always been there for me. He went to hell for me. This whole time he looked down and let out a bitter laugh. And I shot him. The bottle entered Sam's field of vision. He looked up at Chuck's sympathetic face. Looks like you could use this more than me, Chuck offered. Sam looked back at the bottle. He took it from Chuck's grasp and swallowed a mouthful, making a face at the bitter burn. Where is he? He asked. That Crystal Cave place. Chuck replied uncertainly. It's in Mexico, has finished lamely. Sam and Chuck turned their heads at the sound of wings, only to find the room empty. I'll be back soon, Chuck said, slightly uncomfortable as he headed back to his chair. I think I should tell you Dean knows. Sam gave Chuck a confused stare. About the blood drinking thing, Chuck elaborated. He hasn't said anything about it to anyone. Sam didn't know what to think. Seraphiel, Dean whoever he was, hadn't said anything. Hadn't told the angels. Hadn't even confronted Sam about it. He was keeping Sam's secrets without ever being asked. He should be mad at Dean for keeping this from him, but he was keeping secrets as well. Maybe if he'd been more open and honest with Dean, Dean would have been more open with him as well. Castiel landed in Cueva de los Cristales and reached out with his grace. After some wandering through the sweltering heat, he finally caught a slight tingle. The oversized crystals were throwing his senses through loops. He followed the tingling sensation and finally caught a glimpse of Dean curled up in a corner staring lifelessly ahead, his wings wrapped tightly around himself. Dean didn't make any movement as Castiel approached. Castiel stood in front of Dean, staring down at the broken angel. He reached out to Dean's grace. He felt such sorrow and self-hatred there. More than what he was used to feeling from Dean. It was so overwhelming that he gasped as he pulled away. But that's true, isn't it? Dean asked, still unmoving. Is what true? Castiel asked. He wanted to comfort Dean, but he didn't think he could stand to mix with the sorrow again. So he sat next to Dean and hoped physical comfort would be enough. He wrapped an arm around Dean's shoulders as he had seen humans do. Dean leaned into Castiel. I started the apocalypse. I broke the first seal. Yes, Castiel replied. When we discovered Lilith's plan for you, we laid siege to hell, and we fought our way to get to you before you. Jump started the apocalypse, Dean interrupted. But we were too late. The technicality. I started the apocalypse on a technicality, Dean said bitterly. When a righteous man spills blood in hell, or something like that. I am not a man. I am not righteous. Dean Winchester is, Castiel pointed out. Yeah. I saw the contract. I was bound to this body for my stint in hell. Never really questioned why until now, Dean said. So why save me? Why not let me rot down there? It's not blame, that falls on you, Dean. It's fate, Castiel said. And the righteous man who begins it is the only one who can finish it. You have to stop it. Lucifer? Dean questioned shakily. The apocalypse. I can do it, cause. Face it, you're all screwed. Our father chose you for a reason. Yeah. Right, Dean bit out. All part of the stupid fucking plan, I am sure. I believe in you, Seraphiel. Dean stiffened at his name. Please come back with me. Castiel placed his free hand on Dean's thigh. Dean shied away from Castiel, but was still being held tightly. Sam is worried. He knows who you are now, and he regrets his actions, Castiel said. Dean sighed. I don't know, cause I just don't know anymore. I don't think I can do this. If not to stop Lucifer and the apocalypse, then do it for Sam, Castiel said. He wanted to say more, to show his selfishness, but he shouldn't. But, it was probably what Dean needed right then. Will you do it for me? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Dean twisted in Castiel's hold and stared at him. Castiel was looking straight ahead, a look of apprehension on his face. Oh of course, Dean softly replied. Castiel turned to face Dean. He slowly brought his hand up and lifted Dean's chin in an imitated movement. He leaned in and softly kissed Dean. Dean let out a soft moan. Castiel opened his grace to Dean and felt relief that the sorrow had ebbed back to something tolerable. He basked in Dean's wanton need. The desire for physical closeness and more. Dean grabbed a Castiel and deepened the kiss, thrusting his tongue out and teasing a Castiel's lips. He pulled back and groaned loudly when Castiel caressed his wings. Fuck, cause, he panted. He let out another moan when Castiel gripped the base of his wing. Castiel gasped as Dean tore open his shirt and began kissing his chest and sucking on his nipples. He had never felt anything like this. It was better than their first kiss. It was so physical, so taboo. He risked delving deeper into Dean's grace. He found the sadness was drowned out by love and passion. He cried out as Dean thrust a hand into his feathers. Dean positioned them so that Castiel was lying down and he straddled Castiel's hips. He sucked at Castiel's neck and whispered into his ear, Don't stop, cause. Don't let go. Castiel bared his neck, allowing Dean better access. He had both hands entwined with Dean's wings, gripping tightly. Something was building up between them. The world had dropped away and all he could feel was Dean stroking his wings and grinding their hips together. His whole being was tingling and suddenly, he felt a release. Seraphiel. He screamed as he came, gripping tightly at Dean. He felt Dean's release follow swiftly after, pleasurable tingles vibrating between their graces. Castiel breathed heavily, staring at the large crystal that loomed overhead. He took a moment to admire its beauty, but was jerked back to reality when he felt a pinch on his wing. Stop that, Dean said, voice gruff. Dean's gruffer voice sent a shiver down Castiel's spine, and he soon found his vision filled with Dean's smug grin. Oh, you like that, huh? Castiel could feel his face heat up. Was this what it felt like to blush? He didn't have time to worry because Dean was distracting him with soft, loving kisses. Dean, he tried to say in between kisses, we need to please, Seraphiel Dean, your brother's waiting. Dean huffed out an annoyed sigh. He sat up, but didn't remove himself from Castiel's lap. Castiel propped himself up on his elbows and stared at Dean questioningly. Dean. Yeah. Dean stood and held out a hand and helped Castiel up. Castiel glanced at the wetness that had formed at Dean's crotch. Are you able to restore your clothing, or do you require assistance? He asked. Dean closed his eyes and bit his tongue. Cause you are, without a doubt, the worst mood killer ever. And within a blink of an eye, Dean's clothing was clean. Still rumpled, but clean. Now clean yourself up and lead the way. Sam shot up when Dean and Castiel landed. Dean. He turned to see his brother hiding just behind Castiel. Dean, Seraphiel I am. Just Dean, Dean said. I am sorry. Sam stepped up to Dean and pulled him into a tight hug. Why didn't you tell me? Did Dad know? Dean pulled out of the hug and looked away. Dad would have probably tried to kill me if he knew. I didn't tell you because, well, I thought you'd freak out. Oh, believe me, Sam said, I am freaking out. Dean shrugged and gave a little grin. Sorry. Sam smiled as he looked over Dean. His smile slowly slipped into a frown. Dean gave Castiel a quick once-over then himself, wondering if there had been any evidence of their little tryst. As far as he could tell, there wasn't. Castiel's permanent bedhead could hardly count as evidence, right? Oh, come on. Dean. Really? Hey, Dean exclaimed defensively, it's been a while, okay. And wings are kinda sensitive. But he's an angel. Sam gestured to the angel in question, and Castiel shifted uncomfortably. So am I, Dean pointed out. He felt surprisingly lighter at admitting it and smiled. Sam's mouth snapped shut. His shoulders slumped and he stared down at Dean. Hey, are we good? Dean asked, uncertainly. Yeah, we good, Sam confirmed and hugged Dean close. He closed his eyes when Dean wrapped his arms around him. Ended. Let's move on. Second episode. Here's more.